The Terrifying Legend of the Great Devil King Part 2. Su Emo brought Luo Shi back to Zixia Peak and settled down. Luo Shi's clothes were tattered and had many patches on them. Not only were they very old, but they were also obviously one size too small. It was obvious that before he joined the sword sect, he must have been a child from a poor family. Su Emo prepared a new piece of clothing for Luo Shi, and then asked Luo Shi to take a shower. He put the clothes in front of the bathroom. At the same time, she carefully arranged a room in the attic for her. The room was decorated with pink wallpaper, and hung with various exquisite hanging lamps, many dolls, pink panthers, and was exquisitely decorated like a princess room. These modern props are naturally obtained from various treasure chests. At the same time, he arranged this room completely according to Luo Shi's room in the main world. As a boyfriend, he naturally had the honor of entering Luo Shi's boudoir. Luo Shi, do you think there's anything else you need to decorate the room? Hearing Luo Shi's footsteps, Su Emo guessed that she should have finished taking a shower, so he turned around and asked. At this time, Luo Shi, who had just finished taking a shower, was still wearing her original clothes and standing nervously at the door of the room. She stared with her eyes wide open, staring blankly at the layout of the room. She didn't dare to come in for a long time. She was completely stunned. She had never seen such a beautiful room before. She didn't dare to come in here. She was afraid of dirtying the room. So her feet stayed carefully outside the door. Luo Shi? Why don't you change your clothes? Don't you like it? Seeing that Luo Shi was still wearing the same clothes as before, Su Emo couldn't help but ask. Can I wear it? Luo Shi's beautiful face turned red. She stood there blankly, her little hands nervously twirling the corners of her clothes, looking a little at a loss. Obviously, she didn't think that this ridiculously beautiful dress was prepared for her. Of course Luo Shi can wear it. This is prepared for Luo Shi. Tell Master, what did Luo Shi go through in the past? Su Emo walked up to Luo Shi, squatted down, touched her little head, and asked softly. Luo Shi's ignorance and cautiousness made Su Emo heartbroken and a little worried at the same time. After changing to a new environment, Luo Shi must need time to slowly adapt, but she is so cautious. What on earth had she been through before? Feel the warmth in Su Mo's palms. Luo Shi opened her eyes wide, and imprinted Su Mo's appearance deeply in her mind. Looking at the gentle big brother in front of me, my master. In fact, she still doesn't know the specific meaning of the word master. But she could feel that this big brother was very good to her, really very good. For the first time, she felt an unprecedented warmth. This kind of warmth is different from the warmth from the nice older sister who brought her here. Luo Shi can tell the difference. And, when my big brother called my name, he was so gentle. Thinking of this, her eyes became moist again, and her eye sockets were red. Don't be afraid, Master is here. If Luo Shi has any worries, just tell Master. If you miss home, Master will take Luo Shi home to visit. Su Emo continued to comfort softly. Thinking Luo Shi might be a little homesick, I said. When she heard the word, go home, Luo Shi couldn't help it anymore. Her expression suddenly became nervous and flustered, and she threw herself into Su Mo's arms. Master, can you please not chase Luo Shi away? If you want Luo Shi's blood, just take it. Luo Shi. Luo Shi will definitely be good and won't move this time. Luo Shi can eat very little at each meal and is very resistant to beatings. As long as Master doesn't chase Luo Shi away. Luo Shi cried and sobbed. The tears that kept falling hit Su Mo's heart. What blood do you want to draw? Why would Master draw Luo Shi's blood? I can't bear to beat Luo Shi. I can't chase Luo Shi away. Talk to Master carefully. What did Luo Shi go through before? Su Emo suppressed the bad feeling in her heart, tried to appear gentle, and asked. Wow. They all wanted to draw Luo Shi's blood. Luo Shi's mother died, and her father was gone too, so her uncle sold Luo Shi. Then they locked Luo Shi up in a very dark and small house, saying that Luo Shi was a very good medicine inducer. Luo Shi was afraid of the pain when having her blood drawn, so they beat her. Luo Shi has no home anymore, Never go back there again. Master, please don't chase Luoshi away. Luoshi kept sobbing. In her mind, going home meant returning to that hell again. She thought Suemo was going to send her away. He didn't want her anymore. Be good, Luoshi. Master will not abandon you. Suemo comforted softly, with a deep complexity in her eyes. To this day, given his state of mind, his emotions have not experienced such great ups and downs for a long time. In the outside world, the originally clear sky began to be stormy. Suemo still hugged Luoshi calmly. But the sudden change in the weather outside and the outburst of the aura from Jianshin Buhuai that overwhelmed the entire sword sect all represented his mood. Everyone within 100 miles of the sword sect was bearing his terrifying pressure. The tree wants to be still, but the wind does not stop. Luoshi is the empress. I don't need to avenge him. But it's still okay to collect some interest first. Suemo yells. Brush. The next moment, Xiaojio, who was floating in the air beside him, felt the master's unexpressed anger, and the sword body trembled. The entire sword body was anxiously shuttling back and forth in circles in the house. Swoosh! Finally, as if receiving the master's order, the soul-devouring sword shot up into the sky like an arrow. A silver light streaked across the sky, and a strong sword intent pierced through the clouds, breaking through the endless black clouds. The soul-devouring sword was getting faster and faster, and the clouds were constantly being left behind. It's excited. Excited for the upcoming kill. It is shy and docile in front of its master, but when facing its enemies, it will be a complete devil's sword. After being silent and sealed for more than 1,000 years and never drinking blood, the soul-devouring sword will show its style to the whole world for the first time. The spirit sword can kill immortals and demons. This day is going to change. Mei Chongqing stood with his hands behind his back, looking up at the ever-changing sky and murmured. Even with her master's level of cultivation, she was still terrified by the overwhelming aura that seemed like the power of heaven. Not to mention the other disciples of the sword sect, who were all in a panic, fearing that the world would end. It was she who brought Luoshi back to the sword sect, so she naturally knew how miserable Luoshi's life experience was. She also killed those who caused rebellion, but she did not eradicate the root of the problem. After all, she had seen too many such things. The devil is like weeds in the field. As soon as one batch is gone, another batch will appear. But Suemo doesn't seem satisfied. This girl is so valued by him. Mei Chongqing had a complicated expression. She didn't know whether it was a good thing or a bad thing to bring Luoshi back to the sword sect. But there is no doubt that the situation in the whole world will change drastically because of a girl's crying. It seems that conquering Luoshi is much easier than he thought. It was just that when we first met, a grand peach blossom fell, and a flute was played in the garden full of peach blossoms. Give her a lollipop. Say a few soft words of comfort to her, hug her and coax her. She seems to regard you as the only one. Children are not so easy to fool. However, after learning about her past, you will know that you are her only light in the darkness. None of this is surprising. For someone who has always been in the dark, it doesn't take much. Just give her a little warmth, just a little. The little girl was the happiest person in the village, although her family was not well off. But he has parents who love him and a warm home. The little girl is very pretty. She has been delicate and cute since she was young, like a delicate porcelain doll. Her parents love her very much. Until she was 6 years old, the little girl grew up in laughter and had the happiest childhood. But at the age of 6, all the misfortunes came one after another. The little girl's mother fell seriously ill overnight and died. When the little girl was 7 years old, her father passed away, and suddenly the little girl became homeless. The villagers were ignorant and said that the little girl was a disaster and a demon, and had killed her parents. The little girl suddenly became the most unpopular person in the village and was often verbally abused, spat on, and bullied for no reason. She was eventually adopted by her only relative, her own uncle. The little girl was very happy and felt that someone finally wanted her. But after a long time, the feeling of living under someone else's roof finally emerged. The little girl was bullied repeatedly by her cousin, but she kept silent and did not resist. But one time, the cousin pulled the little girl's hair and insulted her parents while pulling. This time, the little girl couldn't bear it anymore and pushed her cousin. My cousin was pushed down and went to my aunt to complain. Then, without asking why or knowing the truth, the aunt slapped the little girl on the spot. "Useless thing, you little disaster, money-losing thing, don't you look at whose home it is? Are you getting bolder?" From then on, the dirty and tiring work at home began to be done by the little girl. Until the end, all the housework was done by the little girl alone. If it were just this, the little girl wouldn't be afraid. She felt that at least she still had a home, and relatives. And she can help her uncles and aunts with housework, then she is still useful, not a disaster star. But fate always seems to be more harsh on the little girl. Only 1 year had passed, when the little girl had grown more and more beautiful. The only uncle who was kind to the little girl began to look at her with an expression mixed with intriguing desires. My aunt got mad and had a big fight with my uncle. In the end, my aunt won the fight by relying on the power of her mother's family. When the little girl curled up in the corner, worried about the quarrel between her uncle and aunt, worried about whether she had not done something well enough, she had no idea what fate awaited her. The final result is, not only did her aunt and uncle take away the only house her parents left for her. Because of the ugly, jealous face of the aunt, she was ready to sell the little girl, saying that she would definitely get a good price. When the little girl cried and begged not to sell her, she curled up in the corner and said fearfully that she would work hard in the future, and would not eat too much. My uncle turned his face away. Although he was reluctant, he was helpless. My aunt's face was full of cruelty and jealousy, like a madman. She said, "Since you have a seductive face, you can go to a brothel and be a whore." That hysterical sentence is still engraved in the little girl's heart. The little girl still couldn't escape her fate and was sold to human traffickers. I guess fate is also a bully, and misfortunes only happen to the poor. Falling into the hands of human traffickers, the rule there is that all children who come in must be beaten first. Beat them until they submit. Beat them until they are afraid. Beat them until they lose the ability to think independently. In the end, they can only humbly pray to stay alive. Become a puppet at the mercy of others and do whatever they want. However, later, when beating the little girl several times, the traffickers discovered that it seems that no matter what kind of injury she suffered, even if she was beaten all over, the little girl would recover as before the next day. The human traffickers were horrified and sold the little girl to a higher-level demon organization, the famous Tianma cult. The Heavenly Demon Sect is the undisputed #1 demon sect in the world. It is an existence that terrifies both the righteous and the evil. It is said that there are no less than 5 masters inside. What's more, the giants of the magic world from the previous century are still surviving, and it is said that their cultivation has even surpassed the realm of the Grand Master. Until now, no one dares to mess with the demonic cult. After the people of the Tianma cult captured the little girl, they began to try various methods to cause different degrees of trauma to the little girl's body. It seems that as long as there is still breath left, it will recover the next day. They conducted a series of inhumane experiments on the little girl. In a later experiment, it was discovered that the little girl's blood was of great benefit to warriors. It could not only improve their cultivation, it can also heal various injuries. From then on, the little girl became the medicine guide of the demonic cult. I was trapped in a dark underground cage all day, and the only thing I had to wait for every day was to have my blood drawn. Then they continued to torture her body and perform inhumane experiments. If it weren't for the little girl's special physique, she would have died countless times. It was not until the little girl was 14 years old that she was rescued by a Taoist priest and escaped from that hell. Finally, she met her master again. That little girl is Luoshi. The Heavenly Demon Cult, the human traffickers, and the so-called relatives who are doing beastly things. I learned the whole story in Luoshi. Su Mo narrowed his eyes slightly. his gaze flashing with bone-chilling coldness. Regarding the Heavenly Demon Sect, Su Emo had heard of this organization, but only heard of it. During the years when Su Emo became famous, he mainly relied on the intelligence and tasks from Fingyu Tower to kill monsters and level up. However, the demonic sect was too special, so special that even Fingyu Tower did not dare to provoke it. Any information about the demonic sect was not listed on Fingyu Tower's task list, so Su Emo had never accepted any tasks related to the demonic sect. Therefore, there was no intersection. As for the Heavenly Demon Cult, now that they know about it, they must destroy it, but Su Emo plans to let Luo Shi do it himself. After all, it's a good stepping stone. As for the human traffickers, they had already met Su Emo 6 or 7 years ago when he just debuted. The Shuyan village, which was feared by everyone at that time, was a human trafficking organization that mainly trafficked women and children. But now it seems, the killing is not enough. The soul-devouring sword had been sent out before. The soul-devouring sword had a spirit, and could spontaneously distinguish between good and evil. It will spontaneously find people who have been infected with Luo Shi's scent. Anyone who has been tainted by Luo Shi and anyone who has bullied Luo Shi will not be able to escape. In addition to this, anyone identified as a villain by Shijio along the way will also be killed. Originally, he didn't want to go to great lengths to slay demons and monsters. After all, when one reaches his level, he naturally knows that where there is light, there is darkness, and all things are interdependent and mutually exclusive, and everything will exist in opposition. But now, the devil looks really tenacious, Su Emo murmured, with a cold light flashing in his eyes. Although this demon is like weeds in the ground, they will grow again when you pull them out. At least while he is around, there are no demons in this world that he wants to kill. Looking at Luo Shi, who was tired of crying and fell asleep in his arms, her sleeping face was extremely beautiful, but not relaxed. Even in her sleep, she still held Sumo's hand tightly, not daring to let go for a moment. Her often wrinkled eyebrows and slightly trembling long eyelashes showed that she was having another extremely terrible nightmare. No wonder I didn't see any wounds on your body when I first came here. I thought you were safe and sound before, at most your family was a little poor. But now it seems that it's because of your special physique. Is it because you are the Empress? I should have thought of this earlier. She is only 11 or 12 years old, but due to long-term malnutrition, she is so thin that she looks like a girl of 7 or 8 years old. Su Emo murmured. Whenever he thought of this, he was filled with deep self-blame. With a sigh, he carefully picked up Luo Shi's soft body like a princess. Su Emo stood up and carried her to the princess' bed that had been carefully prepared for her. After covering her with the quilt, Su Emo looked at the familiar sleeping face, glanced at Xiao Luo Shi deeply, and then left. After returning to his room, Su Emo was speechless for a long time. While Luo Shi was thinking about how to conquer this world, he was also pondering on his attitude towards her. He recalled the main world, where he had a conversation with Luo Shi. At that time, he asked, "If one day, someone who looks exactly like me, even has the same name as me, comes to you, will you like him? If it's not Su Emo, then why do I like him? I like Su Emo, the one who confessed to me in the summer, held an umbrella for me on rainy days, held my hand when there were many people around, cooked delicious food for me, and spent so much time with me. Su Emo doesn't have to look like this, and doesn't have to be called this, but I will still like Su Emo. What I like is the experience we had together, the special feeling that came from that particular time. Although they look exactly the same and have the same name, their personalities, temperaments, and experiences together are different. Since these things are different, then everything is different. If everything is different, is he still my Su Emo? Since he is not my Su Emo, I naturally won't like him." That time, it was Luo Shi from the main world who gave a rare serious answer. The logic was extremely clear, and Su Emo was stunned by it. He is still impressed by it. "Your answer is that you don't like it," Su Emo muttered to himself. "What about me? Can I really control myself? Can I not like this Luo Shi? But I haven't seen my Luoxi for 17 years. Now an identical person appears, that familiar face in my memory. I really miss you. And just at this moment, a weak call came from outside the door. Master! Suddenly, a weak call came from outside the room. Su Emo was stunned for a moment, then stood up, opened the door, and looked at the small figure standing outside. She was holding a pink panther at the moment, and was shivering in the cool night breeze, with her little face turned red by the wind. She seemed to have been standing outside the door for a long time, but she was still hesitant as to whether to disturb her master. At this moment, it seemed that he had finally mustered up the courage. In fact, with Su Mo's level of attainment, even if he was distracted thinking about the problem, he should have already noticed Luoxi standing outside the door. But Luoxi's status as an empress is different. She seems to be naturally close to the way of heaven. She is completely integrated with the surrounding environment. Even if he wasn't concentrating, he wouldn't be able to sense it. What are you doing outside? Come in? Looking at the shivering Luoxi, Su Emo hurriedly pulled her into the room and closed the door. While warming Luoxi's body with his true qi, Su Emo asked, "What's wrong, Luoxi? Can't fall asleep after waking up?" Luoxi nodded her head first, then nervously pulled Su Mo's sleeve and said uneasily, "Master, I'm afraid, as soon as Luoxi closes his eyes, he'll be back there again. Those bad guys are here again. It's so dark there. I don't want to go back there. Can I sleep with Master?" Thinking back to when Luoxi had nervously held her hand in his sleep, it seemed like she was having nightmares. Su Emo just felt a little blocked in his heart, sighed lightly, and nodded. After all, she is just a little girl. No matter how much of an empress she is, this is also the time when she feels the least secure. When they first arrive in a new environment, combined with their previous experiences, they will definitely need more company than children of the same age. "Yeah. Master is the best," Luoxi said happily. Luoxi and Su Emo were lying on the same bed, of course, each of them was covered with a quilt. "Master, are you asleep?" In the night, Luoxi opened her eyes wide, and her beautiful pupils glowed faintly in the darkness like a cat. She was very energetic at this time, but asked in a low voice, "Not yet, what's wrong, Luoxi?" Su Emo asked. "Master, I dare not close my eyes. I am afraid that once I close my eyes, I will return to that place again, and you will all be gone." Luoxi said in a low voice. "Be good. Luoxi, don't be afraid." "Then Master, tell Luoxi a story." After thinking about it, Su Emo said, "Great, hee, thank you, Master." Then, Su Emo started telling the story of Yang and Xiaolong Nu. That was the first time Yang and Xiaolong Nu met. They met in the ancient tomb sect. The moment Yang saw Xiaolong Nu, he was dumbfounded because he had never seen such a beautiful woman before. Since then, Yang and Xiaolong Nu have been calling each other master and disciple. Luoxi was also stunned when she saw the master. She has never seen such a handsome man, Luoxi said with a smile. Loquacious. Su Emo shook his head and sighed. He continued preaching. Yang and Xiaolong Nu began to live a shameless life in the ancient tomb sect. No. They lived like ascetic monks. "Master, what is shameless?" Xiao Luoxi asked curiously. Su Emo. "What do you mean by shameless? Did I say that?" Luoxi, you heard it wrong, Su Emo said. Luoxi pouted her lips and said unconvincedly, "Luoxi didn't hear it wrong, Master just said there is no shame or impatience." "I didn't. I was talking about the ascetic. It's shameless and impatient." Su Emo. Why is this child so stubborn? Seeing that Luoxi was almost crying, as if she was saying, "If you don't believe me, I'll cry for you to see." Su Emo was completely defeated and decided to just brush it off and skip the topic. "Okay, you are shameless." Then, Xiaolong Nu started to teach. "Master, what is shameless and impetuous?" Xiao Luoxi asked curiously again, forcing the topic back. "Why is this kid so curious? It means that the master and the apprentice respect each other, the master is knowledgeable, the apprentice respects the master, and the two get along well. Suemo made up something. Oh, so that's how it is. Then I will live a shameless life with master in the future. Luo, she said happily. Suemo. That's really a punishment. Xiaolongnu began to teach Yanghua how to practice. Then Yanghua and Xiaolongnu began to practice the Jade Girl Heart Sutra together. As Suemo was talking, she didn't know when a soft feeling started to creep into her arms. I don't know whether it was intentional or not, but Xiaoluoshi rolled around like a kitten, rolling from her quilt into Sumo's quilt. Suemo paused, knowing that she lacked a sense of security, so he did not refuse and continued. Because the highest level of the Jade Girl Heart Sutra requires two people to practice together. Sometimes they would undress and practice in the flowers. Seeing that Suemo didn't respond, Xiaoluoshi went even further and hugged one of Sumo's arms, and quietly leaned her little head on Sumo's shoulder. It seemed that this was the only way to give her a sense of security. Smelling the special fragrance coming from the girl next to him, Suemo felt even more complicated. Even the smell is the same. Suemo suppressed his thoughts and continued to talk. I don't know how long I talked. Xiaoluoshi was already drowsy. The little head nodded several times. Master, did Yanghua and Xiaolongnu end up together? Luo, she asked in a daze. Yeah, we're together. Suemo Dao. It's good to be together. After hearing these words, Xiaoluoshi seemed to finally feel relieved, with a sweet smile on her lips. After a while, he fell into a deep sleep. Xiaoluoshi fell asleep in Sumo's arms. It was not until he woke up the next day that Suemo realized that his shoulders were wet. It was obviously some little girl's crystal-clear saliva, flowing all over the floor. Suemo frowned and pushed away Luoshi, who was lying on him like a sloth. Looking at her sweet sleeping face, her tightly furrowed brows were relaxed, and it was obvious that she was sleeping very peacefully. Suemo sighed, then got up and prepared to practice sword. Although he is now invincible in the world and has found someone who is worthy of the title of Empress. But his habit of practicing sword day after day will not change. Several months passed. Suemo was dressed in white, holding a 3-foot cold sword, and standing with his hands behind his back. Opposite him was Luoshi, whose small figure was standing there in a formal manner, holding a wooden sword in his hand with a serious expression on his face. Now Luoshi followed Suemo and also wore white clothes. After a few months, Luoshi finally adapted to Zixia Peak and knew that her master would not send her away. She no longer had the ignorance and caution she had at the beginning, and now exuded a new vitality. In the past few months, Suemo has been more focused on helping Luoshi adapt to the environment of the entire Zixia Peak, as well as building a good physique and laying a good foundation for martial arts training. At the same time, it also makes it easier for the master and apprentice to get to know each other and have a good way of getting along. And now, it is time to formally teach Luoshi martial arts. Luoshi, this set of swordsmanship of mine is the supreme inheritance I learned from the sword sect. It is quite profound and extensive. It doesn't matter if you can't learn it the first time. Suemo stood with his hands behind his back and spoke loudly, with the demeanor of a master. Yes, master. Luoshi took it seriously. Brush. Then, Suemo started to demonstrate. As the long sword dances, the majestic sword intent is freely displayed, which is the starting posture of 10,000 swords returned to the origin. Because Xiaojiu went out to fight demons and defend the way, leaving his useless master here to pick up the girl. He then took out the Qihong sword and used it again. The Qihong sword was seen waving and circling in the air like a silver dragon, creating one beautiful sword flower after another, which was indescribably ethereal and freehand. In the end, Suemo even floated in the air, and 10,000 illusory swords condensed from sword intent appeared behind Suemo and fell from the sky. At this moment, the sky seemed like a rain of swords. The silver lightsabers covered the entire sky, indescribably shocking and extremely dazzling. At this point, the Wan Jianguizong technique has been fully used. Originally, he had planned that the first time he taught Luo Shi martial arts, he would definitely start with the basic Changhong swordsmanship. But he can't stand up to the Wan Jianguizong martial, whose skill effects are maxed out. Let him show off his coolness first to win some favor, and then it wouldn't be too much to teach Luo Shi the Changhong sword technique, right? Ding! Luo Shi is deeply shocked and attracted by your profound and extraordinary sword skills and dancing, favorability +1. After using the Wan Jianguizong with great satisfaction, I saw that the favorability rating had indeed increased a little. Su Mo couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth slightly, and then he was ready to persuade Luo Shi not to be discouraged. After all, this set of supreme swordsmanship of the sword sect, with his sword realm, was just the beginning when he first obtained it. And Luo Shi, who had never touched a sword before, how could he possibly learn it? So Su Mo opened his mouth to comfort her. Luo Shi, this sword technique is indeed difficult. It doesn't matter if you can't learn it the first time. Master will teach you slowly in the future. Wink wink. Before Su Mo had finished speaking, countless lightsabers appeared behind Luo Shi the next moment. Although not as exaggerated as Su Mo's dense rain of thousands of swords. But at least there are more than 1,000. I saw those 1,000 lightsabers, rushing straight towards Su Mo. Su Mo. Wasn't this? Su Mo stood there stupidly, mouth wide open, until a rain of swords rushed towards him. Ah, master, be careful. Xiao Luoshi exclaimed and said anxiously. Su Mo finally reacted and waved his sleeves to annihilate the sword intent. Illusion, that must have been an illusion. How could anyone learn the art of 10,000 swords returning to the origin just by taking a single look? Even at that time, he still relied on inheritance and a very high level of swordsmanship to barely get started. Master, am I really stupid? You taught me once, but I still haven't fully learned it. I can't control the strength. Luo Shi was standing there nervously, rolling up the corners of his clothes, and said with a look of self-blame on his face. Su Mo. Su Mo twitched the corners of his mouth. He felt that Luo Shi was in Versailles, but he had no evidence. Ding, please pay attention. After watching your swordsmanship, Wan Jianguizong, the person with the status of Empress seems to have gained some enlightenment. The realm of swordsmanship +100,000, the level +10, please successfully conquer it before it breaks through the void, otherwise it will not be able to return. Ding, please pay attention, the person with the status of the Empress has learned the 10,000 swords returned to the origin. It seems to be mocking Su Mo's incompetence. When the system prompt sounded, Su Mo couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. Luo Shi really learned the 10,000 swords returning to the origin in one glance. And it's upgraded. Is this the terrifying thing about having the appearance of an empress? Su Mo just felt a surge of pressure. At this rate, won't it be soon before I enter old age? Is there nothing left to teach? Next, I will teach you another set of sword techniques, called Holy Spirit Sword Technique. In terms of power and difficulty of comprehension, it is even more powerful than the 10,000 swords returning to the origin. Su Mo was a little bit skeptical, so he also used the Holy Spirit Sword Technique this time. And in order to test Luo Shi's limits, this time he used all the swords from Sword 1 to Sword 18. This sword technique can be said to be the most difficult sword technique in the world. Even my master in the past. Brush. Another astonishing sword energy was slashed out by Luo Shi. It directly carved a deep gully on the ground, and continued to cut into the distance, leaving behind a field of stunning figures. Su Mo. You've practiced before? Su Mo swallowed hard, suppressing the frustration in his heart, and asked tentatively in a low voice. No, this is my first time holding a sword. I just thought the sword technique of my master was so simple, so I just did it as he said. Luo Shi blinked her big innocent eyes and said, Su Mo. Holding a sword for the first time. The sword sect's supreme sword technique is very simple. For the first time, he was able to swing out thousands of sword energies. A person without any martial arts foundation can learn the basics of 10,000 swords returning to the origin and Holy Spirit sword skills with just one look. Listen, is this human language? I don't know why, but from the moment I held the sword in my hand at a young age, I knew I would be the leader in swordsmanship. Luo Shi looked confused again and continued. Suemo. Stop. It's never going to end, right? Okay. I admit that I let you pretend. Although I asked you to worship me as your master, I didn't ask you to learn to act cool from me. Suemo was completely stunned and speechless, not knowing what to say. Okay, Kendo leader, come on, show me how to do it again. Suemo Dao. Yes, master. Brush. Luo Shi danced with the sword again, this time using the 10,000 swords returned to the origin. In an instant, thousands of lightsabers were flying all over the sky under Luo Shi's control, circling around her. If you can't control the direction and strength when using it for the first time, so this time, I have it under control. Although it only has a physical form, without much of the true meaning of the sword condensed in it. But it was only because Luo Shi's physical fitness was too poor. But generally speaking, after only practicing twice, I have already mastered the essence of 10,000 swords returning to the origin. Suemo was completely silent. Next, Suemo handed the star-chasing moon to Luo Shi. As expected, just one look will. Suemo is already numb. When the most supreme martial arts in the world seemed like a piece of cake in front of Luo Shi, Suemo really didn't think it would be difficult for Luo Shi to break the void. But fortunately in this world, Suemo was born earlier. Otherwise I'll be Luo Shi's burden again. Luo Shi is still the same Luo Shi, no matter which world he is in, he is extremely talented and terrifyingly strong. Name, Luo Shi. Age 12. Level 13? Talents, Protagonist Halo, Innate Holy Body Dao Tai, not activated, Innate Sword Body. Halo of the Protagonist, born with a bad fate, but able to turn misfortune into fortune, turn disaster into blessing, and be favored by heaven. Once you get rid of the disaster in your childhood, you can become a hidden dragon in the abyss and soar into the sky. Innate Holy Body and Dao Embryo, born close to the Dao, who is the peak at the end of the immortal road. Once you see the Holy Body and Dao, it becomes empty. Innate Sword Body, born with the talent for swordsmanship. Ever since I held the sword at a young age, I knew I would be the best in swordsmanship. Qualifications: the appearance of a female emperor, unprecedented in history. Skills: automatic repair, passive, 10,000 swords returned to the origin, Holy Spirit sword technique, chasing stars and moons. Automatic repair: no matter how serious the injury is, it will be automatically repaired the next day. Favorability: 91. Dear, you are her salvation. Comment: this is a little girl who is easy to coax. She was coaxed away by you with just a piece of candy. After secretly taking a look at Luo Shi's attributes, Suemo was speechless for a long time and fell completely silent. No wonder Luo Shi's life was so miserable. It turned out to be because of the halo of the protagonist. And the innate holy body, isn't this one of the most powerful immortal cultivation physiques in the fantasy system? Cultivating immortals is just like playing, so practicing martial arts is naturally a piece of cake. This also explains why Luo Shi's level cannot be upgraded according to common sense. At the same time, the question mark on the level can also explain the reason. Luo Shi, she is not within the scope of the martial arts system evaluation of this world. This is the first question mark Suemo encountered. This means that once her innate holy body constitution is activated, or erupts, it is no exaggeration to say that, even he might not be able to do it, or this plane may simply cease to exist. But fortunately, the normal combat power is only level 13. Otherwise, he might as well not be a master, and Luo Shi is really easy to deceive. You can't do this. Your talent is just average. You need to practice harder. Looking at Luo Shi running around happily like the wind while chasing the stars and the moon, Suemo said sourly. The whole person has turned around, and his back looks a bit more vicissitudes and desolate. He can no longer tell who is cheating. Yes, master. Luo, she will work hard. Luo, she raised her incredibly beautiful little face and said seriously. Well, you better stop trying. I'm afraid if you try hard, I won't have anything to teach you later. At the same time, the entire martial arts world was in a bloody storm because of a sword. When Suemo was teaching his little apprentice to practice sword, at this time, a bloody storm was set off in the martial arts world because of a sword. No one knows where the sword came from or why it happened. But once he appeared, he stirred up endless storms, and the entire world was in turmoil because of him. It is regarded as a fairy sword, a divine sword, and is also called an evil sword and a magic sword. There seems to be no fixed limit on the number of people it kills. It kills members of the evil sects, people of the righteous path, and even ordinary mortals have been killed by its sword. For quite a long time, it was called the evil sword and the magic sword, and it was feared by everyone. No one knows why it kills people, and no one knows whether they will be the next person to be killed by its sword. Once he targets someone, no matter how far away they are, they will not be able to escape from his sword. Since then, people in the martial arts world have been in panic. Several righteous masters once joined forces to punish the demon sword, but they were all unable to do anything. The 4 great masters who joined forces were all seriously injured by his sword. That battle shocked the world. However, just when people thought that the world was about to be in mourning and the 4 great masters would all die, but the magic sword let them go. It flew straight into the distance again, as if looking for its next target. It was not until then that people discovered that the evil sword did not kill innocent people indiscriminately, but had its own laws of killing. It was not until someone began to look for detailed information about those killed by the magic sword and search for the pattern of killing that they found out. It turns out that the so-called righteous people are all hypocritical, colluding with the evil cult and working together for evil. That mortal is also a criminal who secretly oppresses the people and bullies them. He deserves death. The magic sword kills people, but it only kills villains. Kill the bad guys. Kill the devil. It has its own way of distinguishing good from evil. It is like a sword of punishment sent by God. Absolutely fair and just. All those hypocritical villains, no matter how deeply they hide, no matter how powerful they are, as long as there is guilt, the magic sword will kill them one by one. Oh? What? You are the son of the county lady? You are the direct disciple of a certain master? You are in a high position? You are rich? You eat barbecue and bully women and beat people? Do you have someone above you? A protective umbrella? Are the officials colluding with the gangsters? Then I'm sorry, you are facing a magic sword that is full of emotions and no one can cure it. He would only follow the orders of an unscrupulous master. As long as the crime was unforgivable, all would be killed. Any power, identity, status, and social skills are meaningless in front of it. As long as someone has committed enough evil, he will be killed. Since then, the magic sword is no longer called the magic sword, but is respected by the world as the fairy sword. As people continued to come into contact with the sword, they discovered that there seemed to be 2 ancient small characters engraved on the hilt of the sword Xiaojiu. Some people speculated that it was the name of the magic sword, while others speculated that it was the name of the owner of the magic sword. But no matter what, the immortal sword has an owner, and that is undisputed. Everyone showed their magical powers and began to look for the owner of the magic sword. The most diligent ones are those who hold high positions and have done some shady things, but are not completely evil. They also don't quite know whether their crimes will lead to a magical sword falling from the sky one day and beheading them. Some disciples who claim to be from famous and upright sects have been killed by the magic sword. None of these people know if they will be the next one. With the continuous revelations, some clues were finally found, involving a person who was hailed as the new generation of righteous leader, the Sword Immortal. Ever since the Sword Immortal became the elder of the Sword sect, there have been no legends about the Sword Immortal in the martial arts world for a long time. But everyone remembers this brilliant swordsman who suddenly appeared a few years ago and dominated half of the martial arts world as soon as he appeared. He was the youngest master in history. Everyone speculated, if the Sword Immortal was the owner of the magic sword, then what level of cultivation did the Sword Immortal himself reach? I'm afraid he must be far above the Grandmaster, and has reached that legendary realm. But legends are just legends after all, and no one can confirm them. Until, when a prince who had committed many evil deeds was killed by a magical sword. The most powerful people in the world, the royal family, finally could no longer sit still. They sent several masters together, led by a great master, to ask the Sword Immortal for an explanation. At this time, in the Zixia Peak of the Sword Sect, Su Mo, who was teaching Luo Shi, seemed to sense something and felt a slight movement in his heart. However, Su Mo also understood the principle of using courtesy before force, and did not take direct action. But first rumored. Sword Sect ahead. Outsiders are prohibited from entering. The sound of thunder rumbled and spread throughout the world. With his status, he is like the supreme elder of the Sword Sect, so naturally he can represent the Sword Sect with full authority. After hearing this, the several royal priests, as well as the masters and grand masters who were invited to help, naturally could not leave without even seeing him. Seeing that they did not listen to the advice and still wanted to go up the mountain, Su Mo sighed lightly. Luo Shi watched this sword carefully. Ah? Master, why? Because this sword will be very handsome. Brush. Su Mo pulls out the sword. An extremely dazzling sword light, like a golden avenue, carried with it the most sublime sword intent and an invincible sword force that swept across the world, slashing towards the distance. In an instant, all that was left before the eyes of the masters was this sword light that filled the entire sky. Facing this sword light, they actually felt unable to resist. The majestic and invincible aura made them feel as if they were facing the entire world. At this moment, the power of heaven and earth was replaced by the power of sword. At the critical moment of life and death, the masters used all kinds of trump cards and secret methods, and finally broke through the sword force. They hurriedly joined forces to resist, using all kinds of means. But the next moment, the sword light mercilessly swept them away like a whirlwind. It continued to slash towards the distant mountaintop. The sword light crossed the mountain directly and finally disappeared into the distant sky. Boom! The next moment, a thunderous roar was heard. The mountain that was crossed by the sword began to shake, and rocks rolled down. Boom boom. Tremors like earthquakes continued to come. The entire top of the mountain began to slide down in unison. It was actually cut in half by a single sword. Several masters were shocked. Perhaps the sword master was holding back, and under this devastating sword, they were only seriously injured and beaten to death, with their breath barely remaining, but no one was injured or killed. However, they were already frightened like frightened rabbits. In panic, they began to flee in panic, dragging their seriously injured bodies. It is unimaginable that several masters working together could not stop the Sword Immortal's sword from the air. The remaining force was undiminished, and it cut off a mountain from midair. Is this really something a warrior can do? Those who escaped spread the news to the world. The whole world was shocked. Since then, people have known. It turns out that at some point, the Sword Immortal has truly stood at the pinnacle of this world, unrivaled in the entire universe. This one person alone can suppress this world. At this time, at the headquarters of the Heavenly Demon Sect, located in the deepest part of the earth, there is a huge pool of blood here. It is hard to imagine how many people's blood it takes to fill this pool. There is an arena in the center of the blood pool, on which is placed a mysterious and ancient formation. In the center of the formation, there is a coffin. He seemed to be using the formation as a guide to absorb the power of the entire blood pool. Why are there fewer and fewer virgins and children sent by children? A eerie and terrifying voice came from the coffin, echoing in this huge underground space. Reporting to the old demon, now, only 1 in 100 of the followers of my holy church are left. They were all killed by a magical sword. countless branches were destroyed by the magical sword. The followers were terrified and dared not show up in the outside world. A figure appeared in front of the coffin and said respectfully. However, his voice trembled uncontrollably. Obviously, even he was afraid of the coffin in front of him. Immortal sword. What immortal sword? Tell me, ancestor, what interesting things have happened in the martial arts world during the hundreds of years I have been asleep? The demon ancestor asked. Yes. At that moment, the members of the demon cult began to tell about the turmoil in the martial arts world over the years. Especially about the sword immortal. A few minutes later. Ha ha ha, what a fairy sword, what a sword fairy. I didn't expect that more than 1,000 years have passed, since the old thief who broke the void left, there would be such an interesting descendant in this world. The demon ancestor laughed heartily. My divine power will soon be perfected, and I will be able to break through the void and leave. I can easily kill this sword fairy when I ascend to heaven. Now, you gather the remaining believers here. They have collected a lot of virgin blood and boy blood for me over the years. I will reward you. The demon ancestor said. Yes. When the subordinate withdrew respectfully with a fanatical look. Inside the coffin, the old ancestor muttered to himself. It's still a little short, but after I swallow you, it should be almost done. Luo Shi, the sect competition is coming soon. As the eldest sister of our Zixia Peak, do you have the confidence to lead our Zixia Peak to victory? In the main hall of Zixia Peak, Su Emo sat on the Peak Master's chair. Looking at Luo Shi below, he said with a serious face. Master, yes. Luo Shi quickly raised his hand, looking confident. Very good. Then Luo Shi, as our junior sister of Zixia Peak, you must not hold Zixia Peak back at the critical moment. Do you have the confidence? Su Emo asked again. Master, I have it. Very good. Luo Shi, you have always been the most talented disciple among my disciples, and you are the one that I value the most. So, I will choose you as the leader of Zixia Peak in this sect competition. I hope you will not disappoint me. Su Emo nodded. Ah, Master, do you have other disciples? Xiao Luoshi asked curiously. No, I just have you. Su Emo shook his head and said. Luo Shi. Then why does it seem like we at Zixia Peak have more people and more power when Master says it? Luo Shi's little head was full of doubts. So Luo Shi, who is both the senior sister and junior sister and the only disciple of Zixia Peak's leader. He represented Zixia Peak to participate in this competition. Soon, 2 or 3 days passed and Luo Shi successfully entered the finals. When Luo Shi entered the finals, Su Emo, the master of Zixia Peak and the supreme elder of Jianzhong, naturally had to attend. Su Emo, who was not much older than the other contestants, was already in a high position. Sitting on one of the 3 chairs that represent the most status and power, Su Emo calmly sipped his tea. Looking at the group of energetic and vibrant disciples below. His eyes were full of sighs. It's great to be young. Puff. Sitting on the 2 chairs nearby, Mei Chongqing and the Sword Sect's leader, who were sipping their tea, almost spit out the tea. In terms of youth, who can compare to you? If you stand down there, how will those older disciples survive? Soon, the first game was about to begin, and before it started, the leader gave a speech. There are still 11 contestants who have successfully entered the finals. That means, according to the previous competition system, 1 person will be given a bye and directly advance to the winner's group. For the sake of fairness, Luo Shi, the chief disciple of Zixia Peak, will enter the winner's group. Do you have any opinions? Su Emo asked calmly, his voice sweeping across the entire audience. In this sect competition, Su Emo is the supreme chief referee. It can be said that he is fully responsible for this competition. No problem. That's fair. I think so. Elder Su is mighty. A large group of disciples and elders twitched their lips, but did not dare to say anything. He kept shouting, 666, with an enthusiastic look on his face. Ha! Only Xiao Luoshi was confused and got a bye in the first round. Soon, the first game started. The first match will be between Qingxi Peak CMO and Jian Peak Wang Dawei. Now, start. Su Emo floated in the air above the stadium, acting as a referee. At this time, he was looking down at the entire arena and announcing the start. The game is about to begin. Qingxi Peak CMO vs Jianfeng Wang Dawei. ZMO wins. Qingxi Peak Xiao Xiaofeng vs Zhujian Peak Liyun. Liyun wins. Wang Wei from Zhujian Peak vs Zhou Yang from Jianfeng Peak. A draw. There were 5 competitions in total, and they came to an end quickly. Since 2 players ended up in a tie in the first match, both fell into the loser group. So there were 4 people who successfully advanced to the winners group, and Zhao Luoxi was one of the 5. Okay, now the ones who advanced to the winner group are ZMO, Liyun, Luoxi. The loser group is. Since there is one more person in the winners group, for the sake of fairness, Luoxi, the chief disciple of Zixia Peak, will be given a bye this round and will be the first to enter the winners group finals. Does anyone have any objection? Su Emo also. Without. That's fair. The disciples had complicated expressions as they looked at Luoxi standing there innocently. They felt envious but did not dare to say anything more. Who says Luoxi's master is the best in the world? Very good. Now, let's start with the winners group and compete in the semifinals to select the winners group finalists. Su Emo nodded in satisfaction and announced. The first match is between Qingxi Peak Zimo and Liyun. The 3 finalists for the winners bracket are Liyun, Zhao Kai, and Luoxi. There is one more player. In view of Luoxi's outstanding performance in the previous rounds, Luoxi will receive a bye and advance to the finals in advance. Do you have any questions? Su Emo asked again. You told me that we had 2 byes and it was a good performance? Everyone's expressions were distorted. Although many of the disciples were Sumo's diehard fans, they couldn't stand seeing the rules being trampled on like this. Then Luoxi had a bye in every game and advanced directly to the finals, so what are they competing for? However, when they thought of Sumo's great reputation, they swallowed the words that were about to come out of their mouths. Very good. Now, the winners bracket final begins, Liyun vs Zhao Kai. The winners of the finals now include Liyun and Luoxi, and the losers of the finals include ZMO. There's one more person. It's really hard to deal with. At this point, Su Emo floated in the air, and a chair appeared under his body with his sword intent, and he sat in the air. He was stroking his chin, seeming to be quite distressed. The people below looked up at the godlike figure. Even though no breath was leaked, it still made them breathless. It was as vast and dazzling as facing the sun, and an aura that overwhelmed the world. Is this the power of being number 1 in the world? Many people murmured in their hearts. But at the same time, looking at Su Emo who was lost in thought, everyone had a bad feeling. But I can't do that. He's the best in the world. You can't be so shameless. You can't be. You can't. In that case, I declare that in this final, given that contestant Luoxi's overall performance is very outstanding, contestant Luoxi will take first place. He will become the champion of this competition. The Luoxi contestant overcame all difficulties and his spirit of not fearing danger is worth learning from. Let's applaud. Su Emo hammered his hand, finalized his decision, and announced. Sword Sect Master. Mei Changqing. The disciples below. Great. Nephew Luoxi is extremely talented and should be the best among his peers. He deserves the title of champion in this competition. The Sword Sect leader was the first to clap his hands and applaud. Indeed, it is well deserved. Mei Changqing also nodded in agreement. Soon, the other peak masters and elders also began to applaud. Only a bunch of dumbfounded disciples were left behind. You're too lazy to even go through this scene? Isn't that a bit too much? They were totally shocked. But there is no way. For the high-ranking officials in the Sword Sect, there is a fairy sword in the outside world, hanging over their heads. Who knows when that sword will fall on their heads? Even in the Sword Sect, no one dares to say that they are absolutely clean. Therefore, facing that person floating in the sky, whose realm was unknown, no one dared to say no. It's just a competition among the younger generation, so let's just make the internal decision. But they didn't even bother to go through the cuts scene. This is really a bit too much. But who called him Sumo? As long as this guy is happy. Wait, I have a question. As the elders clapped and cheered, a discordant voice was heard. The whole place suddenly fell silent. The sword sect's leader secretly thought to himself, "Oh no! Whose disciple is so unruly? Dare to compete with the world's best disciple for the championship? Aren't you afraid of being cut down by a magic sword falling from the sky?" Only when he saw clearly the person who was speaking did the sword sect leader breathe a sigh of relief. "It's her, then it's okay. Master. I have a question." Xiao Luoxi raised her hand. It was obviously the first time she raised her hand to speak in front of so many people. She was a little nervous and her pretty face turned red. "Contestant Luoxi, do you have any questions?" Sumo asked with a serious face. Master. I haven't competed yet." Luoxi scratched his head embarrassedly. "You don't have to compete anymore, you've already won." Sumo Dao. "You are my apprentice. You have already defeated them so much." No, I haven't even played a single game yet. How can I win the championship? This is not fair. Xiao Luoxi shook his head like a rattle and spoke righteously. Very good. Luoxi discovered the problem in time, had the courage to raise the question, found the loophole in the game at the critical moment, was not afraid of power, and successfully defended the fairness and justice of the game. He deserves praise. I think he can be awarded the first-class merit for the sect," Sumo said, nodding with satisfaction. "Yes, Luoxi's nephew is worthy of being the leader of the new generation of disciples in my sect. He discovered the loophole in the sect's competition in time, and stopped this behavior from happening. He should be awarded first-class merit," the sword sect leader affirmed. "Nephew Luoxi, you are a role model for my generation. There is no need to compare. Nephew Luoxi is already number one." Everyone was talking at the same time, and the more they praised, the more outrageous it became. It really made Xiao Luoxi below embarrassed. In that case, since Luoxi's proposal is problematic, the rules for this final will be rewritten. Sumo cleared his throat, and a vague aura swept across the entire venue. The whole place fell silent immediately. Now, the rules of the finals are as follows. A group of you go to fight Luoxi alone, and whoever stands at the end will be the champion. Everyone. Before everyone could be shocked, Sumo said, "Well, let me add one more rule. If there is still someone standing on the stage within 3 seconds, Luoxi will be disqualified from the championship." Hiss this. Elder Su, there is no need to compare in my heart. Luoxi's nephew is already the well-deserved number one, otherwise. Yes, there is no need to compare. Luoxi's nephew is definitely the first. The elders nodded repeatedly. Obviously, he was afraid that Sumo would be too arrogant and Luoxi would lose, which would be a disgrace to him. "Elders, why don't you go up and try it too?" Sumo raised his eyebrows and said. They immediately stopped talking. Now, even those who lost in the previous trials, as long as they feel that their strength is not that great and have the confidence to compete for the championship, can enter the ring. Sumo Dao. When this was said, everyone was shocked. Soon, faces twisted, full of struggle, and finally flushed with excitement. One after another, about 100 people came up to the stage. "Contestant Luoxi, you have 3 seconds to get ready," Sumo said. "Yes." Luoxi's face turned serious. "I declare, the game begins." Brush. Before everyone could see what was happening, a huge wave of air swept across the world. All the disciples in the arena, without exception, felt the world spinning around them. He had no time to resist at all, and his whole body was lifted high into the air. Then everything went black and he lost consciousness. The wind wave continued to move forward, sweeping towards all the surrounding buildings and the elders' platform. In the shocked eyes of the elders, even the sect leader, the wind wave came in an instant. The overwhelming momentum was such that even they were suppressed and unable to move, and they had a vague feeling of being unable to resist. It seems that at this moment, I am facing the whole world. It looked like the gust of air was about to hit the elders. Suemo raised his hand and waved it. 4 sword energies stood up around the arena, isolating the air waves inside the arena. Crack. There was a sound like breaking glass. Even Sumo's casually swung sword energy almost broke into pieces. But in the end, it was blocked dangerously. If Suemo had not deployed these 4 sword energies, this huge palace might have been destroyed by Luo Shi in an instant. Boom. Then, a huge sound was heard, and a huge cloud of smoke rose up from the entire arena. The arena was torn into pieces in an instant. Most of the disciples had already fainted from this blow. The few that could stand were covered in dust and dirt and couldn't even stand up. Only Luo Shi was floating in the air, watching all this in a daze. Hey, I told you guys to let Luo Shi take a bite, but you guys refused to listen and even acted like you dared not say anything. Do you really not trust the character of Elder Su? Are you okay now? Hey. Suemo sighed and looked at the few seated players who were still standing, with a look of disappointment on his face. When Luo Shi gets angry, even I am afraid of him. How dare you guys play one-on-one with Luo Shi after drinking so much? The remaining disciples had expressions of fear and confusion. They looked at Luo Shi, who was only 13 or 14 years old, standing in the air with an innocent look, as if he were a monster. Then they looked at Elder Su, who was not much older than them, maybe even younger than them, but was already the best in the world. Their expressions turned pale and blue, gradually filled with fear, then their eyes rolled back, and they fainted. These master and disciple are both monsters. Well, there's nothing we can do. The only contestant still standing is Luo Shi. I declare Luo Shi the champion of this competition. Amidst the silence, Suemo announced helplessly. Now you guys have no objection, right? Of course, there's no point in having an opinion. As expected, Luo Shi became the champion of this sect competition. According to the rules of the sword sect, seniority is never ranked according to age or time of initiation, but rather according to strength. Whoever wins the competition will be the undisputed chief disciple of the sword sect. So Luo Shi, at the youngest age, became the eldest senior sister of the entire sword sect. 1 year has passed, and Luo Shi's growth is beyond imagination. She is a true genius. Even in the world of immortal cultivation, her talent is unprecedented and she is worthy of being called an empress. Not to mention in this world of warriors. And from the moment Luo Shi grasped the sword, after taking a look at the most brilliant swordsmanship in the world, at that moment she no longer needed anyone's guidance. She had already mastered all kinds of sword techniques in the world without a teacher. In her own words, from the moment she held the sword at a young age, she knew that she would be the leader in Kendo. Suemo can only be said to be a guide on her road who can help her avoid detours. In just 1 year, she has gone from a little girl who has never learned martial arts to someone who can defeat her peers with a single sword. A master who could even destroy the elders with one sword. Such qualifications are worthy of a female emperor, and it can only be said that such a talent is rare to find in the ages. In my original reincarnation, I probably didn't make it to the audition. Now he has taken the seat of the referee, manipulating the game at will. I have to say, things are unpredictable. Another year later. Ding, your spirit sword Xiaojiu killed a demon cultivating warrior. Experience value plus 10,000. Ding, your spirit sword Xiaojiu killed a warrior of the demon sect in the Baodan realm. Experience value plus 100,000. Suemo started his lying life again. In the past 2 years, Xiaojiu was sent out to fight demons and defend the Dao, so that he could level up himself. I stay at home to train, and teach my little apprentice, and occasionally practice swordplay when I have some free time. My life is so comfortable. But the scene of asking Xiaojiu to help me upgrade, doesn't it look familiar? Suemo muttered to himself. Luo Shi, your posture is not right. The sword posture should be like this. Oh, that's right, Your waist should be straighter, and your butt should be raised a little more. Well, not bad. Keep your head up and chest out, keep it up. Looking at Luo Shi, who was sweating profusely, Su Mo pointed casually. The memory vaguely went back to the time when he was practicing sword and his master Long Xiao, who was teaching him how to practice. Yes, master. Luo Shi raised her little face and answered seriously. No matter how talented Luo Shi is, some basic skills and physical fitness still need to be improved through step-by-step practice and long-term accumulation. Well, that's right. You are a teachable kid. Seeing Luo Shi being so well-behaved and obedient, Su Mo couldn't help but nodded with satisfaction. Today, I have become a teacher. When Su Mo was reminiscing about the past, he suddenly remembered something. I think I started leveling when I was 1, and started practicing swords when I was 3, I also liked playing with ants at that time, huh? Ants? Su Mo muttered to himself, some almost forgotten memories emerged from his mind. And it was at this time. Ding, your cute pet Xiaolu made a comeback and killed the 1,000-year-old python in a desperate situation, giving you experience points plus 1 million. Ding, your Xiaoliopu has been promoted to Grandmaster. A series of prompt sounds came, making Sumo's head buzz, and then he was shocked. F***ck, Xiaolu. At this moment, the 10,000 ants that he had killed successfully evolved into a different species, Xiaolu. The memory that was originally blurring gradually became clearer. After all, when Xiaolu first evolved, he was only 2 years old, and then he let it work for him. This period of working and free-range farming lasted for 17 years. I have almost forgotten about it. It quickly looked through the system records about pet templates. All you can see above are the stories about Shilio's difficult journey of killing monsters and leveling up. Ding, your cute pet Xiaolu was not afraid of danger and defeated the Siberian tiger. You will get plus 10,000 experience points. Ding, your cute pet Xiaolu used a trick to trick the man-eating crocodile, giving you plus 10,000 experience points. Ding, your Xiaolu is tired and wants to take a vacation. Ding, your leave application has been automatically rejected. Xiaolu has been working hard for 16 years, and his work and growth history filled with blood and tears is clearly presented in front of Sumo. There were tens of thousands of system reminders. God knows what Xiaolu has been through in the past 16 years. Because the pet system's panel reminder is not in the same place as Sumo's personal panel reminder. Later, Su Mo even blocked some unimportant and repeated messages. This includes the hard work experience and upgrade reminders from a certain pet. At this time, because Xiaolu was promoted to Grandmaster, it was also a big event, so the system finally came out to remind him again. Name, Kuroku. Level, 71, Grandmaster. Race, Silverhorned Ant King. Talent, Natural Power, Silver Copper Iron Bones, Asexual Reproduction. Evaluation, Xiaolu has grown into Lao Lu. At this time, Xiaoyo's race has not only evolved again, from the Iron Horn Ant King to the current Silver Horn Ant King, and the ability to reproduce asexually. This means Xiaolu can reproduce. Not bad, Xiaoliozi, you should be brave after knowing shame. Looking at Xiaolio's current information, Su Mo couldn't help but sigh. But we agreed to grow up together, how come I'm already an invincible god, but you're the Grandmaster? Su Mo communicated to Xiaoliozi through the pet system. Besides, you can actually give birth to your own child? Are you that perverted? Seeing Xiaolio's additional ability to reproduce asexually, Su Mo was shocked. Master. Master. A faint call came through the pet system. There was obvious excitement in his voice. It seems to be saying, Master, I am so awesome. Not bad, but you have to work harder, Xiaolu. You have to learn from Xiaojio. Look how hard others work in the same unit as you. Su Mo said again. Then he gave Xiaolu a new task. That means just like Shijio, slaying demons and eliminating evil. Xiaolu received the master's order and immediately led his offspring. The first time I stepped into this world, and appeared before the world. At this point, there is not only one magic sword in the world that punishes the world. There are even rumors that there are monsters appearing. But that monster doesn't like to kill or burn people, he only likes to do good deeds. 2 years have passed. Now Suemo is 19 years old. His handsome face is no longer childish, but as handsome as jade. He reached an age he had never reached in his previous life, and also reached an unprecedented height. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I seem to be able to see myself when I grow up. Luoshi is also 14 years old now, and has grown into the same look as when he first saw her in the main world. The difference is that her temperament and personality are completely different from Luoshi in the main world. In the past 2 years, they have spent a lot of daily life together. For example, on one occasion, for some reason, Luoshi became obsessed with cooking. "Master, it's time to eat." Luoshi called out sweetly. "Ah, master, I feel a little uncomfortable in my stomach today, so let's not go." Suemo was lying leisurely on the lawn, watching the clouds rolling by, holding a piece of grass in his mouth. His expression froze and he spoke without raising his head. "Ah, master, my stomach feels uncomfortable. Is everything okay?" In a flash, Luoshi appeared beside Suemo from the kitchen, already using the star chaser. She knelt down like a lady with her legs slightly bent, and asked carefully and worriedly, "Why? Don't you know why your stomach is uncomfortable?" Suemo couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. "Nothing, maybe I just caught a cold." Suemo said nonsense casually. Although with his current cultivation level, even ghosts would not believe him if he said he was infected with a cold. But Luoshi believed it. Luoshi's pretty face showed a nervous expression, and her little hands were curling up the corners of her clothes. "Master, don't worry, I will definitely save you." As she spoke, Luoshi's eyes were already red, her nose twitched, and she looked like she had tears welling up in her eyes but was trying hard not to let them fall. Luoshi's eyes gradually became firm, and then his figure flashed and disappeared. "Suemo, I just caught a cold, I'm not going to die. Not that serious." Looking at Luoshi leaving, Suemo opened his mouth, thought about it, and paused. "Then I held a piece of grass in my mouth and looked at the blue sky and white clouds. This way, Luoshi won't have to stick to him anymore, and he won't have to eat death dishes. It's rare to have quiet time, just right." Then for several days in a row, Suemo rarely saw Luoshi. The few times I saw Luoshi, it was just her red eyes and her hurried back. She said, "Master, don't worry, I will definitely save you." Suemo was stunned by what he saw, and sometimes he couldn't help but wonder if he really had some serious illness. Until the evening of a month later. When the sunset falls, the gorgeous clouds are covered with colorful clothes. "Master, I'm here. This is the medicinal soup I made." Luoshi ran over with a bowl of medicine soup in his hand, looking dusty. "You are?" Suemo was astonished. "Master, please try this. It will definitely cure your cold," Luoshi said, her dusty little face full of anticipation. Looking at the black medicine that seemed to emit a bad smell, Suemo swallowed uneasily. Will I be killed even if I don't have any disease?" But when he looked up, he saw Luoshi's face full of anxiety and nervousness, and her watery eyes were full of anticipation. Suemo made up his mind and finally picked up the medicine and drank it. The moment he drank it, Sumo's expression twisted and changed. A strong smell of traditional Chinese medicine mixed with bitterness almost made me vomit on the spot. It seems that even if he is the best in the world now, he cannot resist the bitterness of the medicine. However, looking at Luoshi's expectant expression, he had no choice but to swallow it. "How is it, master?" Luoshi asked nervously. "Not bad, the taste is just right." Suemo nodded and approved. "Yeah," Luoshi said excitedly, with a look of relief on her face. Then his expression relaxed and his whole body fell straight backwards. Suemo moved, and the moment Luoshi fell, he was already behind her. Looking at Luoshi, who had fallen asleep in his arms, even so, there was still a sweet smile on her lips. Suemo looked at it, speechless for a long time. Elder Su, I am really suffering. These days, your little disciple has been pestering me to learn medicine for a month. He also asked about the classification and uses of various medicinal herbs. Don't worry, she's just overworked. According to my estimation, your disciple hasn't slept for at least a month. Even a master's physique can't bear it, not to mention that your disciple is only 14 years old. Luo Shi was still lying unconscious on the bed, so Su Mo had to ask the elders of the Sword Sect's Medicine Pavilion to come and take a look. But your disciple's medical aptitude is indeed extremely high, which is the only one I have ever seen in my life. In just 1 week, his knowledge of pharmacology is no less than mine. After half a month, I have nothing to teach him. Today, your disciple's medical skills are probably no less than mine. Zhao Yiwei, who had made a great name for himself in the martial arts world and was known as the medical ghost hand, and who was now retired to the Sword Sect and became the elder of the Medicine Pavilion, continued. In my opinion, why not let your disciple switch to medicine? Otherwise, go away, you old man, you are such a bad guy. How dare you snatch my disciples? Su Mo was unhappy, glared at the old man and drove him away. In the past month, I often see Senior Sister in the medical area of the library. Isn't Senior Sister a swordsman? Why is she reading medical books again? I don't know. I often see Senior Sister hanging out in the library. I guess all the medical books in there have been torn to pieces by her. Oh, it's really strange. I often see the elder sister going up the mountain to collect herbs. What do you think she is doing? Who knows? I wanted to say hello to the senior sister on the way, but she seemed to be in a hurry, and I could only see her back. When I came, the sparse voices of the Sword Sect disciples were also echoing in my ears. Looking at Luo Shi, who was still unconscious on the bed, Su Mo slowly sat down beside Luo Shi's bed with a complicated expression. I had just casually mentioned that I had caught a cold. I had never expected that it would cause her such worry and tension. I was not killed, but she also lay down. Ding, you have taken an unknown medicine. The medicinal power is being continuously absorbed. Your physical strength has been strengthened. Experience value plus 999999999 inch. Ding, you have upgraded. Ding, you have swallowed an unknown medicine. The medicinal power is being continuously absorbed. Your physical strength has been strengthened. Experience value plus 999999999 inch. F*CK, what kind of medicine did Xiao Luoshi make? It's quite strong. Su Mo was shocked when he heard the system prompt. Could it be that this 14-year-old disciple of his had invented some magical elixir? It was not until 3 days later that Luo Shi slowly woke up. The first thing I do when I open my eyes is to search for something. Then, she finally calmed down when she saw the figure sleeping beside her bed. Gently climbed out of bed and came to the side of Master. Looking at the handsome face of his master up close, little Luo Shi was in a daze. Master, so handsome, hee. Xiao Luo Shi whispered softly. Thinking of this, she suddenly had a bold idea. The little head moved closer and closer to her master, her rosy lips pouting a little bit as she moved closer and closer. Then, when a pair of red lips were about to touch her master's cheek, Luo Shi. Her master opened his eyes. The beautiful gem-like eyes looked at her quietly. Ah, master. Xiao Luo Shi blushed, took several steps back, stumbled and almost fell to the ground. But Su Mo grabbed him. Xiao Luo Shi fell into Su Mo's arms, and Su Mo held her soft waist to prevent her from falling. The two looked at each other. The atmosphere was a little charming for a moment. As if unable to bear the slightly weird atmosphere, Su Mo suddenly let go, and Xiao Luo Shi fell to the ground. Whoa! Master. Xiao Luo Shi rubbed his head and said aggrievedly. Su Mo has adjusted his posture, standing with his hands behind his back, looking like a cool and handsome man. He said in a cold tone. Are you so awesome? You dare not sleep for a month? Who taught you to be like this? Woo, I'm sorry, master. I was wrong. I was just worried about you. Xiaoluoxi cried. Humph, if you dare to do this again next time, I will not let you off easily. I know, master. Xiaoluoxi looked at Su Emo, who had his back to her, and secretly stuck out her tongue. Lililil, humming, cold and icy. Little Luoxi pouted her little mouth high. Su Emo naturally didn't know about his apprentice's little trick. He seemed to remember something and his face became fierce again. He said, Also, be good next time and don't get so close to me suddenly. What if I can't control myself when I'm so close? It's really torture. Oh. I see. Luoxi uttered, Oh. Heavily and said reluctantly. Seeing that his sneak attack failed and was discovered by his master, Luoxi felt a little unconvinced. You can't blame me for this. Who asked my master to be so handsome? Humph, next time I launch a sneak attack, I will definitely not let master find out. Xiaoluoxi thought proudly in her heart, and then her bright eyes suddenly opened wide as if she had discovered something. Like a little kitten, he came close to Su Emo. She let out a sigh and looked at him curiously. Seeing Luoxi approaching, Su Emo immediately turned around. Xiaoluoxi ran and ran again, and ran in front of Su Emo. Hey, master, you seem to be blushing. Su Emo. I don't. You did. Master, your face is so red. You are mistaken, I didn't. Yes. Time flies like an arrow. In a blink of an eye, another 2 years have passed. This year, Su Emo is 21 years old. That night, the sky was full of stars and the moon was high in the sky. In this reincarnation world without the lights of thousands of homes, the bright moon seems to hang in the sky forever. Su Emo was lying on the eaves of the main hall, staring at the bright moon hanging high in the sky, with 2 pots of sake beside him. After a while, a figure flashed by and Xiaoluoxi also flew up. Master, what are you doing? Call me master. Su Emo knocked her little head and corrected helplessly. Oh, I know, master father. Xiaoluoxi covered her head, cried out in pain, then nodded seriously. Su Emo. Su Emo took a sip of wine and was too lazy to correct her pronunciation of the reduplication. This was a habit that Xiaoluoxi developed when he first came to Zixia Peak. When she first met Su Emo when she was 12 years old, she was so nervous that she called him master and father, and she couldn't stop from then on. Master, what are you doing? Xiaoluoxi asked again persistently. I'm looking at the moon. Su Emo looked absent-minded and murmured softly. The moon? What's so good about the moon? Xiaoluoxi tilted her head, expressing confusion. Where the moon is my hometown. Su Emo speaks. He took another sip of wine. He has been away from home for 21 years. He really wants to go home. Oh, I see, master. Xiaoluoxi didn't say anything else. Instead, he sat on the edge of the eaves. A pair of already extremely proud long legs swayed in the air. Luoxi has no home, but wherever master is, that's Luoxi's home. Xiaoluoxi said. Luoxi. Su Emo just felt bitter in his heart, and didn't say anything. After that Luoxi did not speak. Instead, he imitated Su Emo, picked up the wine jug beside him and started drinking. Until Xiaoluoxi got drunk. Master, if you miss home, why don't you go back? Under the influence of alcohol, Xiaoluoxi's cheeks were already flushed, and she asked with drunken eyes. I can't go back. He has been in this world for 21 years, and he still doesn't know where to go back. No one can explain the matter of feelings clearly. Xiaoluoxi's feelings for him might reach 100 points in the next moment, or they might never reach that point. Master, it's okay. If you can't go back, let Luoxi come to accompany you, okay? Xiaoluoxi asked in a daze. Su Emo didn't say anything. There is no answer to this question. Later little Luoxi fell asleep in his arms. Su Emo picked up Xiaoluoxi and sent her back to the room. Looking at little Luoxi's peaceful sleeping face lying on the pink princess bed, Su Emo had a complicated expression. At this moment, his nerves were numbed by alcohol as he looked at the familiar face. There was confusion in his eyes, and he seemed to vaguely see Luo Shi from the main world again. Su Emo approached little by little, looking at Luo Shi's beautiful face, who seemed to be asleep. His head slowly dropped, and Luo Shi's delicate facial features were clearly visible before his eyes. I could even feel Luo Shi's hot and humid breath, her unique fragrance, and the faint aroma of wine. Little by little, Su Mo's head slowly moved down, as if he was about to kiss her. At the end, Su Emo paused. After a long while, he smiled absent-mindedly, then turned and left. It was not until Su Emo left that Xiao Luoxi opened her eyes, a flash of loss in her eyes. Luo Shi was really easy to deceive. He didn't have to put in any effort at all. To date, Luo Shi's favorability towards him has reached 99 points. This was something Su Emo had never expected. That pile of strategy items wasn't even used. Sometimes, just rewarding her with a lollipop will make her happy for a long time. Once on her birthday, I gave her a Bingpa flower. She still keeps it carefully and waters it all day long. The ice soul flower has taken root and sprouted, growing into a large cluster. It's just that the last bit of favorability, it's a bit difficult to increase it further. A few months later, it was night. Su Emo was lying in bed alone, having not slept all night. Thinking of little Luoxi and Luoxi in the main world, their ages and temperaments are increasingly overlapping. Su Emo felt bitter. There may have been an age difference before. But today, as Luo Shi grows older, she becomes more and more like Luo Shi in her previous life, both in appearance and temperament. He couldn't tell who was who anymore. Sometimes, I even unconsciously think of them as the same person. Master. Outside the door, Xiao Luoxi's voice was heard again. Except for the first few days when Xiao Luoxi came to Zixia Peak, because he was not used to it. Come and sleep with him. In the end, we all slept alone. But at this time, 2 years later, Xiao Luoxi knocked on his door in the middle of the night again. I opened the door and looked at Xiao Luoxi standing outside the door as usual. The bone-chilling cold wind made her little face red. She was wearing pink pajamas and standing there holding the pink panther. While rubbing his sleepy eyes, he looked at Su Emo pitifully. Su Emo was stunned. The scene in front of him seemed to overlap with the scene 2 years ago, when Xiao Luoxi first went up the mountain. Master. I can't sleep at night. I want to hear your stories. I haven't finished listening to the story of Yang Guo and Xiao Longnu. Luoxi said. Good. Su Emo thought about it and nodded. But this time, he spread a quilt on the ground. He planned to sleep on the floor and give the bed to Luoxi. After all, Luoxi was already a grown-up girl now, unlike when she was 12 years old and just came to the mountain, when he could still treat her as a younger sister. Luoxi pouted her lips, but there was nothing she could do. She just hugged her pink panther and went to bed. She always sleeps soundly on a bed filled with the scent of Su Emo. Little Dragon Girl leaped off the Heartbreak Cliff and made a 16-year agreement. 16 years later, Yang Guo has become the famous Condor hero, but he still can't see Xiao Longnu. At this time, Guo Xiang had already secretly developed feelings for Yang Guo, but this was destined to be a love that ended in vain. They first met at Fengling Ferry, and the first sight of Yang Guo ruined her life. From then on, Guo Xiang never married. Later, Yang Guo found Xiao Longnu at the foot of the Cliff of Broken Hearts. They lived together till old age and spent the rest of their lives together, becoming a pair of chivalrous lovers admired by the world. After piecing together his story, Luoxi was still very energetic. Master. Yang Guo and Xiao Longnu are finally together. That's great. But Guo Xiang is also so miserable, she never got married. I don't want to be Guo Xiang in the future. I want to be Xiao Longnu. Xiao Luoxi had an amazing train of thought and thought happily. They chatted about some random things, mostly Luoxi asking questions and Su Emo answering. Until they both began to feel sleepy. Master, are you asleep? After a long time, Xiao Luoxi asked again softly. Su Emo didn't say anything and seemed to have fallen asleep. Xiao Luoxi turned over and lay on her side, looking at Suemo, who was sleeping on the ground. Suemo had already turned his body to the other side, breathing evenly and steadily. Master, do you think we will be together in the future, just like Yang Hua and Xiaolong knew? Xiaoluoxi looked at Suemo quietly, her eyelids slowly drooping. She asked in a daze. Suemo opened his eyes but did not answer. And will never answer. He is destined to leave this world. Another world, and his girl, his sister, is waiting for her. Xiaoluoxi is also destined to break the void, and has a brighter and more grand future. But he probably won't be in that future. They are destined not to be together. A few months later. Luoxi, your expression needs to be a little colder. No, it's too cold. Remember, you have to be calm, with a look of indifference that sees through everything, and the corners of your mouth have to be slightly raised, with a hint of a smile. Wrong again. How many times have I told you to hold it up? Hold it up. On the grassland, Suemo slapped the grass frantically and said with a look of disappointment on his face. Opposite her was Luoxi, who was wearing modern clothes. She wore long black stockings, a JK costume, and beautiful long black hair, and looked like an innocent high school girl. Not bad, that's about right. Just keep this demeanor. Do you remember what I taught you, how to say it? On the grassland, Suemo asked. Remember, master. Xiaoluoxi raised his hand and immediately spoke excitedly, and then his aura suddenly dissipated. I failed again. Let's try again. Suemo is dissatisfied. I'm sorry, master. Luoxi said aggrievedly. Suemo. However, the next moment, her temperament suddenly changed and she spoke in a calm tone. She exuded a faint and ethereal temperament. She looked at Suemo expressionlessly, her beautiful face showing a sense of tranquility. Luoxi, you are here. I stared blankly at the person whose appearance and temperament were exactly the same as in my memory. Suemo subconsciously took 2 steps forward, stretched out his hand and hesitated to speak. But he seemed to have thought of something and stopped immediately. He lowered his head, looking away, as if he was at a loss. Suemo, it's me, I'm here. Luoxi spoke quietly, just standing there with a calm expression, without any other movements. Luoxi, can you forgive me? Can we not break up? Sumo's eyes were red, the corners of his mouth were raised with bitterness, and his emotions were a little out of control. His hands were placed nervously, like a child at a loss at this moment. Luoxi didn't say anything, just looked at him quietly. It seems that he wants to imprint Suemo in front of him into his mind. But those calm and indifferent eyes still trembled. There is an imperceptible sense of loss flowing through. After a long silence. Okay, we won't break up. Luoxi raised the corner of her mouth, slightly parted her red lips and spoke softly. Luoxi. Suemo muttered to himself, and walked forward step by step. I want to reach out and touch Luoxi's face. But just when it was about to touch. Master, how was my acting? Didn't I do well? Xiaoluoxi's momentum faded and he said with a smile. Not bad. Sumo's expression suddenly froze, looking at Luoxi, who was smiling sweetly like a little girl. The hand that was reaching forward to touch his face suddenly stopped. He changed direction and touched Xiaoluoxi's head. You practice well, I'm leaving first. Suemo Dao. The next moment, his body floated away, turning into a beam of light and escaping into the distance. Master, who are you, looking at through me? After Suemo left, Luoxi looked at Sumo's receding figure and muttered to himself. There was an uncontrollable hint of bitterness and loss on his face. In the past, she felt that there was always an indescribable tenderness when her master called her name. But now she knows. Those calls of Luoxi turned out not to be from me. Sometimes master would stare at her face and become lost in thought. At that time, I would always feel secretly happy. But now I know, it turns out that the master was not looking at her, she was just the shadow of another person. And master loves that person very much. In the past, she often muttered that she wanted to be Xiaolong Nu, but now, she found that the ending was already predetermined. She had always been Guoxiang. In the eyes of Master, what am I? She had a complicated expression. Ever since she had a master, she had been carefree. For the first time, she was in a trance for a long time. Su Emo was naturally aware of Luo Shi's little emotions, but he didn't pay too much attention to it. After all, he was also in a complicated mood at this time. I don't know how to deal with my emotions. For several days in a row, Xiao Luoxi was depressed and seemed to be sulking. For Xiao Luoxi, it is impossible to hide her love for someone, and the ripples in her eyes are about to overflow. Of course, when I feel a little emotional, I can't hide it, and my unhappiness is basically written on my face. Whenever she sees Su Mo, her lips pout. She's not as clingy to him as usual. They all watched from afar, with their heads lowered, looking like they were worried about something. Whenever Su Mo looked at her, she turned her head away and didn't look at Su Mo, as if saying, "Don't bother me. I'll give you a lollipop, so don't be angry," Su Mo said, taking out a special lollipop. He patted her head again. Luo Shi immediately rubbed his palm like a kitten, then picked up the lollipop and licked it happily. All the previous unhappiness was swept away. Luo Shi, it's really easy to coax. Spring goes and autumn comes, another year has passed. Su Emo is 22 years old and Luo Shi is 17 years old. This year, Luo Shi crossed the sky bridge. As expected, she is just like Su Emo back then. Became the second person to pass the Tongtian Bridge. But the difference is that walking on the overpass in Luo Shi is not like Su Emo, where he has to stop and go and stumble. Instead, it was as easy as walking on flat ground, and there was not even a single pause in the entire process. It seemed that the 99 sword intentions of Tongtian Bridge had no effect on her. The journey was smooth sailing. Then, under a beam of light that penetrated the sky and the earth, Luo Shi easily and happily obtained the inheritance of the sword sect. Su Emo nodded with satisfaction. Ruzi is teachable. This, the Tongtian Bridge that no one has been able to cross for hundreds of years. Once this era is over, it will be over twice. The sword sect leader couldn't help swallowing. The master and his disciple are both more perverted than the other. Mei Chongqing shook his head. Soon, Luo Shi began to take swords from the sword pool. The moment she stepped into the sword pond, a shocking scene appeared. All the swords in the sword pool began to fly up uncontrollably. Keep circling around Luo Shi. In just a moment, Luo Shi was surrounded by a rain of swords. Combine. The next moment, Luo Shi shouted out this word with great momentum. Then, in the stunned eyes of the crowd, the rain of swords in the sky merged together. Among the countless famous swords, 1/10 of the swords disappeared in an instant and merged into one sword. If he wasn't afraid of taking too many swords from the sword pool at once, this would cut off the sword sect's inheritance, and Luo Shi would probably fuse all the swords. What did you just do? Su Emo was shocked. When did this disciple learn a skill that he himself didn't know? I didn't do anything, master. I just seem to have learned it for no apparent reason. It's like an instinctive reaction. I can fuse all the swords in the world into one and help them evolve and upgrade. I call this the sword-raising method, Luo Shi said with a smile. What a great way to cultivate a sword. Su Emo whispered softly, her eyes complicated. Obviously, this was Luo Shi's own innate sword body or innate holy body at work. It gave her the natural ability to control and fuse tens of thousands of swords. At this time, a weak spiritual fluctuation came from the sword that Luo Shi had condensed. Apparently, Luo Shi had created a magical sword by combining more than 100 ordinary famous swords. On the hilt of the sword, a beam of light flashed and gradually turned into 2 characters full of ancient sword spirit Luo Shi. Brush. I saw that magic sword circling around Luo Shi happily, as if it had its own simple ideas. Although Luo Shi's sword spirit is much less intelligent than Xiaojiu, and does not have the heavenly heart mark and the ability to devour like Xiaojiu, But he couldn't resist the perverted master Luoshi, who continuously nurtured him with the true meaning of swordsmanship. For Luoshi's sword, Luoshi's innate sword body and the true meaning of swordsmanship will be its best nourishment, enough to help it develop its spiritual intelligence. Soon, spring goes and autumn comes, and another year has passed. Su Emo is now level 98, and breaking the void is just around the corner. However, Luoshi, for some reason, stopped at level 89, the perfect state of a Grand Master, and seemed to have hit a bottleneck, failing to break through to the level of seeing the indestructible gods. This is the only place where Su Emo feels he is stronger than Luoshi in all these years. Although he felt that this was probably because Luoshi had no intention of practicing at all, and had too little practical experience, had never experienced any life-and-death situations, and was too lazy to break through the bottleneck. However, bottlenecks do exist for Luoshi after all. They are no longer as frequent as before. With a little enlightenment, they will automatically upgrade to a terrifying level. It was not until this time that Su Emo realized the horror of cheating. Like Su Emo, because of the existence of the system, there is no bottleneck at all. As long as you have experience, you can upgrade. But ordinary people, no matter how talented they are, seem to be faced with bottlenecks set by the heavens. And for a person with extraordinary talent, the bottleneck will be more solid and difficult to loosen. After all, practicing Taoism is going against the will of heaven. However, Luoshi didn't care about the bottleneck in his cultivation. First, she is young. A Grand Master who is only 17 or 18 years old is already rare in the world, and it is hard to find one in the ages. Although in this life, two monsters, Su Emo and Luoshi, appeared as soon as they appeared. Besides, hasn't her master always been there to protect her from the wind and rain? Why does she need such a high level of cultivation? Moreover, as a disciple, Luoshi felt that it was only natural that his cultivation was lower than that of his master. If one day her cultivation level were to be higher than Su Mo's, she would feel embarrassed. Su Emo has always felt that this might be the real reason why Xiao Luoshi has not been able to break through the bottleneck. I am embarrassed that my cultivation level is higher than his. In order to protect his dignity as a master. Thinking of this, Su Emo was speechless. I vaguely feel that this scene is somewhat familiar. However, facing Luoshi's Buddhist practice, Su Emo saw that she herself had no intention of breaking through, so he did not urge her anymore. After all, for a real freak like Luoshi, who knows if she can break through the void with just a little effort? If his favorability level doesn't reach 100 by then, and he can never return to the main world, who can he cry to? Luoshi, come to think of it, it seems like we haven't had a sparring match for a long time, right? Su Emo was lying on the lawn, holding a piece of grass in his mouth. Looking at Luoshi, who was sitting very upright on the lawn with her legs slightly bent, he asked, "Ah, master, it's been a while since we last sparred. The last time I saw you was 2 years ago." Xiao Luoshi thought for a moment and answered, then asked a little embarrassedly, "Is master going to spar again? Well, let me see how strong you are now." Su Emo Tan Dao. Recently, he had a vague premonition of a mysterious feeling that was becoming increasingly stronger. It seemed that he was about to have the opportunity to go back. At his current state, he is in touch with the way of heaven. The premonition is certainly not groundless, it may be a hint and guidance from heaven. Before he actually went back, he wanted to do one last thing. "Yes, master." Xiao Luoshi nodded obediently. The two of them began to float in the air and soon arrived in the sky. Both of them were dressed in white, with outstanding temperament and flawless looks. Standing in the air in the void from afar, they look like banished immortals. What a perfect couple of immortals! Luoshi's temperament is vaguely similar to Su Mo's, both are ethereal and otherworldly. This is because Xiao Luoshi has been imitating Su Emo intentionally or unintentionally. "Are you ready?" The two stood with swords in hand, and Su Emo asked calmly, "Ready, master?" Xiao Luoshi nodded seriously. Brush. The next moment, the two swords met at the same time, and the sky was like a collision of meteors, leaving after images. The two were moving at such a high speed that ordinary people could only vaguely see two white shadows colliding in the sky. Every collision would cause a strong shock wave, and the sword intent would fly in all directions. The sword is not fast enough, not sharp enough. They started with basic sword moves, their figures collided and separated quickly, and in the blink of an eye they had fought for more than 300 rounds. Suemo continued to swing the sword in his hand while speaking. After a while, they found several weaknesses of Luoshi, and Luoshi quickly fell into a disadvantage. The sword power isn't solid enough. What if the one in front of you is an enemy? Is this how you wield the sword? Suemo shouted. Brush. The next moment, Suemo slashed out with a powerful sword. The strong sword light carried the spirit of sweeping across the 9 heavens and 10 earths, and with one sword it shattered Luoshi's sword moves. The remaining force chopped Luoshi down. It didn't until it rolled down to a distant hill that it was able to stabilize its body with the help of the mountain. Luoshi gritted his teeth, and the next moment, he pushed against the mountain with both feet. Boom! A crack appeared on the entire mountain uncontrollably. Luoshi was ejected like a cannonball. He slashed towards Suemo at a faster speed than when he came. Bang, bang, bang. The two exchanged several moves in the air, leaving afterimages in the air. But any sword moves made by Luoshi were easily blocked by Suemo. Suemo's expression became colder and colder. Is this how you usually practice swordplay? Or am I being too indulgent with you? Suemo also cold vocal tracked. The sword in his hand was merciless. He found a flaw and slashed with the sword. The sharp sword technique cut off a strand of Luoshi's hair. In an instant, Luoshi's hair, which was originally tied up, began to spread out. Master. Luoshi stood there in a daze, looking at the chopped hair. He no longer had his usual playful smile on his face, but instead looked a little aggrieved. She didn't expect that today's master would be so strict. If you were an enemy just now, I would have killed you on the spot. Suemo said coldly again, turning a blind eye to Luoshi's grievances. Luoshi pursed her lips, and her hand holding the sword was shaking a little. Boom! The next moment, her gaze gradually became firm. A huge sword force that could destroy the world began to erupt from Luoshi. Suemo smiled disdainfully. Since you can't compare sword moves and sword intentions, are you going to compete with sword power? The next moment, the sword force in his body burst out without leaving any room for maneuver. In just a moment, it filled the entire world. They competed from basic sword moves to sword intent, and even to the current sword momentum. Replaced the power of heaven and earth with the power of sword. The two sword forces were faintly competing with each other. At this moment, the sky seemed to be filled with an invisible sword field. Is this your sword skills? If this is all you can do, then you are not qualified to be my disciple. Suemo sneered, and the next moment, a stronger sword force burst out from his body. Go straight to Luoshi on the other side and crush it. The sword forces that were originally competing against each other suddenly showed a one-sided trend. In just a moment, Luoshi's sword force was crushed by Suemo's sword force in a small space. When Suemo blurted out, "Then you are not worthy of being my disciple," Luoshi's eyes instantly turned red, as if these words struck directly into her heart. His heart was filled with endless grievances, but Luoshi still stubbornly waved his sword to resist. Brush. Squeak. They then crossed each other in the air. The two sharp swords were wrapped in a faint blue light. That was the sword energy of the two people attached to the surface of the sword, forming sword energy. The two sharp swords continued to clash in the air, sparks flying everywhere. Logically speaking, the material of the Qihong sword is far inferior to that of the Luoshi sword. In a normal fight, it would have broken into several pieces long ago. However, for a qualified swordsman, even a wooden sword can kill people without them being seen and can be used against enemies. With Suemo's current strength, he would naturally wrap the Qihong sword with sword intent and sword energy to prevent it from being damaged. It looks like a fight between two swords, but in fact what is really being compared is the sword intent of the two men. The two of them swung their swords one after another at a dazzling speed. Any sword moves have already been integrated into every sword swing and can be used at will. Therefore, there is no such thing as accumulating power before making a sword move. Today, every normal attack is actually a big move. Squeak! Sword cheese flew across the sky one after another, shattering the clouds in the sky. There were even deep gullies on the ground that stretched for hundreds of meters. From 10,000 swords returning to the origin, to the Holy Spirit sword technique, Sword 1, 2, Sword 18, and even the final, Sword 22. They will pursue the stars month by month to the extreme. Their figures were almost everywhere in the sky of the entire sword sect. You may be in the south of Jianzhong one moment, but in the next moment you are in the sky north of Jianzhong. It seems to be everywhere, and its figure fills every corner. Too slow. How do you swing the sword? It's full of flaws. The sword's power is condensed but not solid? Didn't you eat? Don't tell anyone you're my disciple when you go out. Su Mo pointed out her various flaws mercilessly, his tone icy and chilling. When Su Mo blurted out, "Then you are not worthy of being my disciple." In fact, Luo Shi's eyes had already turned red, and her heart was filled with endless grievances. As Su Mo's every word fell, it seemed to hit Luo Shi's heart. Luo Shi's little face was already tearful, with crystal tears falling continuously. Her eyes were red and she was crying while competing with Su Mo in swordsmanship. That scene is so heartbreaking that one can't help but feel pity. However, her sword skills are constantly improving. To Su Mo, although Luo Shi was extremely talented, his foundation was too poor. After all, she had never experienced anything like Su Mo, swinging the sword 10,000 times day after day for 20 years. She comprehended the sword intent and sword realm very quickly, and could master any sword move at a glance. But because she moved too fast, her foundation was not solid and her practical experience was seriously insufficient. At this moment, these shortcomings were quickly remedied by Su Mo's verbal ridicule. Soon, they came to an unknown mountain in the sword sect, a deep mountain shrouded in mist. There was a large area of green grass there, and it didn't look anything unusual. Boom! The two landed on the top of the mountain. Luo Shi cried more and more, no longer caring, and swung out with the sword. A huge sword energy swept across with an invincible force. It flew straight over the swaying green grass. Su Mo used chasing the stars and chasing the moon to easily break through Luo Shi's sword force and avoid the sword energy. Su Mo's body leaped through the air and fell quietly in the distance, leaving behind a back view for Luo Shi. When Luo Shi was about to swing his sword and stab Su Mo did not make any other moves, just stood there quietly, seemingly forgetting to resist. Luo Shi thought that this was another flaw that his master had deliberately revealed, and was about to rush forward. The next moment, a strange scene happened. The green grass that was cut by Luo Shi's sword energy underwent indescribable changes. In an instant, the green grass all over the sky kept turning over and changing color. In a short moment, it turned into a sea of blue flowers. Looking around, the endless green grass was actually just wisps of sword intent, covering up the blue flowers underneath. And that breathtakingly beautiful blue flower was actually the ice flower that Su Mo had given her for the first time. The icy flowers were dancing in the sky, like dandelion catkins, circling around Luo Shi and Su Mo. At this moment, Su Mo and Luo Shi seemed to be in a sea of blue flowers. Luo Shi was stunned. Her figure slowed down little by little. The sword had already lost its momentum, and when it was about to stab Su Mo, it finally stopped. It was not until this moment that I could clearly see the scene behind Su Mo. In that blue sea of flowers, Mei Chongqing, the leader of the sword sect, the elders of the medicine pavilion, the few friends who chat with Luo Shi the most, and the most talented disciples of the sword sect who regard Luo Shi and Su Mo as their idols, all gathered here. They held in their hands all kinds of snacks and gifts that Luo Shi liked. In addition, there are hot air balloons and Luo Shi's favorite human-shaped puppets and rag dolls everywhere. There are also various snacks arranged into strange shapes, decorated with lights and colorful lights, creating a festive atmosphere. And above it, there is a large banner made of sword intent, and on the banner it is written, "Happy 18th birthday to my disciple Luoshi. Mei Changqing. Happy 18th birthday, little Luoshi. Congratulations. From today on, you are a big girl." The leader of the sword sect said, "Happy birthday to Luoshi's nephew. This is the coming-of-age gift prepared for him." The elder of the medicine pavilion said, "Happy birthday, little girl. I, with my old bones, have come to celebrate for you. I hope you don't mind." Sword sect disciples. "Happy birthday, senior sister. We admire senior sister the most." Xiao Luoshi stared at this scene blankly, and the sword in his hand fell down without him noticing. The tears that kept falling had already stopped, but they were still stubbornly rolling in my eyes. "You, Sister Changqing, sect master, everyone." Xiao Luoshi's voice was choked with sobs and Xiao Qiong's nose was twitching. At this time, Su Mo, dressed in a white robe, also turned around slowly. A rare hint of doting appeared on his handsome face. He raised his hand, gently lifted up Luoshi's loose hair, and said softly, "Luoshi, happy 18th birthday. Silly girl, Master just scolded you. You must feel very aggrieved, right? Master just lied to you. You have always been my most outstanding disciple." Su Mo gently wiped the tears that overflowed from Luoshi's delicate cheeks and said softly. Xiao Luoshi opened her eyes wide, and couldn't hold back any longer at this moment. "Master!" She burst into tears and threw herself into Su Mo's arms. The crying little Luoshi did not notice the complicated and solemn expression on Su Mo's face. "This is the last lesson I will teach you. I hope you can remember it in your heart. On the path of cultivation, if you don't make progress, you will regress. Fight with the sky, fight with the earth, fight with people. Only by fighting all the way can you truly reach the top. I'm sorry, Xiao Luoshi, Master can't spend the rest of your birthday with you." Su Mo Dao. He looked up at the sky with a complicated expression. I don't know when, the originally clear sky began to be covered with dark clouds. An extremely dark cloud covered the entire sky, and an evil and terrifying aura descended upon the earth. It's depressing, like the end of the world. As early as this morning, he received news from the intelligence department of the Sword Sect, as well as Xiaojiu and Xiao Lu, that the ancient demon ancestor who lived thousands of years ago had been resurrected. Originally, I wanted to settle the score with the demon ancestor after celebrating Luoshi's birthday. But now, it's too late. He also didn't expect that the so-called demon ancestor would come so quickly. Xiao Luoshi raised her head belatedly at this moment, her eyes filled with confusion. I also saw the dark, oppressive, and terrifying sky. She was about to make a move, but she found that all the strength in her body had been sealed by a sword intent. It turned out that Su Mo had already exhausted all her physical strength in the duel with her earlier. At that time, the sword intent secretly entered her body, as if for the purpose of sealing her at this moment. Master, you... Xiao Luoshi opened her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. Su Mo turned his head away, not looking into her eyes, and his whole body slowly floated away in the air. Sect Master, Uncle Mei Changqing, all the elders of the Sword Sect, Luoshi is now in your hands. Su Mo was high in the sky, bowing to the people from the Sword Sect from a distance. You go ahead. We didn't expect that the old demon from 1,000 years ago would suddenly revive. It's a pity that we are so weak. We can help you. The Sword Sect leader looked solemn and sighed lightly. Su Mo, remember, you are the elder of my Sword Sect, the youngest Grand Master in history, a sword immortal, and the best in the world. You must not lose. Mei Changqing said. Elder Su, you are our idol. You were and are our idol now. We are waiting for your triumphant return. The disciples of the Sword Sect said. Su Mo nodded, took a last deep look at Xiao Luoshi, then turned into a ray of light and fled into the incomparably dark sky. Master! Xiao Luoshi was shouting from behind, tears streaming down her face, her expression filled with fear. Her emotions fluctuated wildly, and she had never been so panicked as at this moment. A vague intuition told her that this might be the last time she and her master met. But at this moment, all her strength and tendons were sealed by the sword intent, and she couldn't break through at all. Xiao Luoxi is only level 89, while Su Emo is already level 98. The gap between them becomes larger as time goes by. So for a short period of time, Luoxi couldn't open his eyes at all, and could only watch Su Emo turn into light and leave. Xiao Luoxi, you must trust your master. If we go, we will only hinder him. Mei Changqing consoled her, his words revealing helplessness. Are you holding us back? Luoxi murmured, and for the first time in his life, he hated himself for not practicing well before. There is a bottleneck, but they are reluctant to break through it. Little Luoxi fell silent and stopped crying. Her red eyes gradually became firm. She sat cross-legged in the sea of blue flowers, and soon, a mysterious aura emerged from her body. These master and disciple are both monsters. But is it really too late to break through now? Mei Changqing looked at Luoxi, who was trying to break through, with a complicated expression, muttering to himself. Sumo's body kept rising higher and higher. Leaped towards the center of the dark clouds in the sky. As they got closer, Su Emo felt more and more stressed. The feeling this might give him was far more than just level 99, and it was very likely that it had already shattered the void. If his strength wasn't so exaggerated, Su Emo could still bring Luoxi along, but Luoxi at this moment was still far from it. Even her ultimate combat power is a question mark. But that extreme combat power represents an unstable time bomb. If the innate holy body in the Tao fetus were truly fully activated, then dealing with that little demon cultivator would naturally be a piece of cake. But what replaced it was the direct destruction of the entire world. Because the martial arts world simply cannot bear the size of the innate holy body. That is the most powerful physique in the past and present that can only be nurtured by countless chaos. However, a small-scale explosion cannot change the current situation at all. With Luoxi's normal combat power, if there was no temporary burst of power, the only outcome that awaited her was to be killed instantly. Reality is not fiction. Instead of pinning our hopes on Luoxi's explosive growth, it would be better for him, the master, to bear it alone. It was worth it. He became the best in the world for once. Boom. Ding, your cute pet Xiao could not bear the humiliation and is already on his last legs. He is seriously injured. Please pay attention to the host. Sumo's heart sank when he heard the system's prompt. In the sky, a silver stream of light came towards Su Emo. Sumo's eyes condensed, and his hands burst with strength, catching the silver figure. It was a large ant covered in scars, with horns growing on its head, and barely breathing. Hee hee. You must be the so-called sword immortal. Not bad. A junior in this age of exhausting qi has actually cultivated to the late stage of seeing the gods, and you are only one step away from the great perfection. Hee hee. He's even more perverted than that old guy back then. The martial arts world 1,000 years later is really interesting. A middle-aged man wearing a blood-red robe and with a face full of hideous wrinkles stood high in the sky. Let out a villain-like laugh. Xiao Lu, are you okay? Without even a glance at the man in the sky, Su Emo held Xiao Lu in his arms, and his figure quickly went down, landing on the ground soon. Looking at the silver ant lying in his arms, already barely breathing. This partner who had been accompanying me from afar and working for me since I was 2 years old. There is an indescribable guilt in my heart. One of my orders, the other party has been carrying it out for 10 to 20 years. Master, Xiao Lu is not a waste. Xiaoyou's voice came intermittently, speaking softly. Yes. Xiao Lu is not a waste. He has never been. Su Emo nodded, feeling as if something was blocking his heart, and he felt uncomfortable and depressed. It was a sentence I said casually 20 years ago, but it still remembered it now. Hee hee. Master. I finally waited for you. Hearing the praise from his master, Xiao Lu stretched out his pincer-like hands, dancing and jumping, happy like a child. At this moment, even though it was seriously injured and barely breathing, but he also held his head high and stood out, like a victorious general. Master, you have to be careful. As his consciousness was about to fade away, Xiaolu said, Don't worry, the master will avenge you. Su Emo gently put Xiaolu on the ground, his voice hoarse. Your master is the best in the world. The demon ancestor flew a large cloud of blood mist and landed at a low altitude. He looked at Su Emo with interest, and then seemed to have made a decision and began to tempt. Boy, you seem to have made great achievements in the way of the sword. With your talent, I, the ancestor, can't help but admire your talent. As long as you become my disciple obediently, I, the ancestor, will not kill you. On the contrary, I will teach you the method of breaking the void. Hearing the words of the demon ancestor, Su Emo turned a deaf ear and didn't even look at him. After placing Xiaolu in a safe place, he has slowly stood up, like a sharp sword ready to strike. He glanced at the information of the demon ancestor without leaving a trace. Name: Heavenly Demon Ancestor, Ultimate Boss. Age: 1241. Level: 100, Broken Void. Skills: Heavenly Demonic Art, Incomplete, Bloodbath Rebirth, Blood Shadow Incarnation, Ghost Shadow Magic. Demon Technique, a fragmentary technique introduced from an unknown plane, which can absorb the blood of virgins and young children and transform it into extremely lean energy, which will cause one to fall into a deep sleep, thereby prolonging lifespan and increasing cultivation. Rebirth in Blood, a magic skill attached to the heavenly demonic art that can use the blood in the body to rapidly regenerate organ tissues. Blood Shadow Incarnation, can transform into a Blood Shadow Incarnation. Each incarnation has different strengths. Ghostly Magical Skill, Ghostly Movements. Evaluation: This is an old monster who has been sleeping for 1,000 years. He has cultivated his blood and energy with magic skills, and has a strong physique. However, after sleeping for 1,000 years, his soul power has weakened. This may be his only weakness. The Great Demonic Art, the incomplete technique from an unknown plane, does it come from the world after the void is shattered? Looking at the information of the heavenly demon ancestor, Su Emo murmured. It turned out to be just as he had guessed. The level of the demon ancestor has reached the broken void, and the secret method he has practiced is extraordinary, far beyond the level of warriors. The weakness is soul attack. Su Emo felt relieved. The martial arts world did not have the means to attack the soul. But, boy, I advise you not to be ungrateful. Even if you succeed in reaching the state of shattered void after several years, how can the heavenly gate be opened so easily? Throughout the ages, I don't know how many geniuses have fallen at the last step of opening the heaven gate, unable to successfully break through the void. Seeing that Su Emo didn't say anything, the demon patriarch thought that he was moved and continued to seduce him. But as long as you become my disciple, I have a secret method that will help you open the heavenly gate with an 80% chance of success. Then, our master and disciple will continue to explore the upper realm. Wouldn't it be better to live in this strange place in the lower realm? The demon ancestor slowly and kindly persuaded Su Emo, and also revealed many secrets that Su Emo did not know, such as that after breaking the void, one actually has to open the heavenly gate. Only after the sky gate is opened can one enter the true state of shattered void. Before the sky gate is opened, shattered void can only be called a false state. But the success rate of opening the heaven gate is less than 10%. Throughout history, countless geniuses have been lost on this path. Secondly, once you reach shattered void, you can only stay in this world for 3 days. The gate to heaven must be opened in 3 days, otherwise you will be directly suppressed by the power of the world and become immortal. Once the opening of the heaven gate begins, it cannot be stopped. If you succeed, you will ascend to heaven. If you fail, you will die. Boy, the ancestor's patience is limited. Don't be like that little ant. I wanted to use it as a chair, but it refused to yield even though it died. It's really tough. Boy, I want to tell you something from the bottom of my heart. When I see you, I am reminded of my youth. I was so handsome back then. Looking at the disgusting face of the demon ancestor, Su-Mo twitched the corner of his mouth. Seeing that the time was almost up, the villain would add to his drama if he started to talk too much, and Su-Mo was not prepared to listen to his nonsense. What answered him was an indestructible sword intent. Brush. Su-Mo slashed out a dazzling sword light that was like a golden road, hundreds of meters long. With an irresistible panic force, he instantly replaced the power of heaven and earth and slashed towards the demon ancestor. Tisk, just a trifle. The demon ancestor raised the corner of his mouth with a disdainful smile, waved his hands, and a rich blood color began to condense in his hands. In an instant, an extremely scarlet blood ball was formed. The blood ball quickly spread and turned into a blood mist, blocking the sword energy. Boom! Su-Mo's sword, which had been accumulating power for a long time, was naturally not so easy to block. Crack! In an instant, the blood mist shattered. The sword light continued to attack the demon ancestor. Looking at the sword lights all over the sky, the smile on the corner of the demon ancestor's mouth froze and instantly turned into solemnity. He could only use a flash of blood to protect his arms and his hands to protect his shoulders to block the attack. Boom! The huge sword energy slashed the body of the heavenly demon ancestor, and a huge shock wave swept across. All the trees on the ground were blown away one by one. The demon ancestor flipped over like a cannonball. But the sword light had been weakened by the previous layer of blood mist, and the demon ancestor finally managed to resist it. 2 deep grooves appeared on the arm of the demon ancestor. 2 sword intentions were attached to the wounds, constantly eroding the demon ancestor's flesh and blood, so deep that the bones were visible. You! The face of the demon ancestor was filled with lingering fear, and before he could speak, brush! Another flash of sword light passed by, and at some point, a meteor came straight from the distant sky. The meteor took advantage of the fact that the old demon was weak in resisting Su-Mo's sword energy, and his attention was attracted by Su-Mo. Puff! In an instant, it passed through the body of the heavenly demon ancestor, and the next moment it came between Su-Mo's clenched hands. Xiaojiu, thank you for your hard work. Looking at his friend flying into his hands, Xiaojiu was filled with joy and affectionate calls. Su-Mo rarely smiles. After many years, Xiaojiu finally returned to his side. In the past few years, Xiaojiu has spent so much time leveling up, killing countless villains, and consuming a large amount of the world's killing energy, blood, etc. Bring out the talent of Soul Devourer to its fullest. The level was also upgraded from the original level 80 to level 89, and even the grade was upgraded from a low-grade spirit sword to a medium-grade spirit sword. Name: Soul Devouring Sword. Rank: Legend, middle grade spirit sword. Level: 89, Grandmaster. Evolution points: 12/1000. Talent: Soul Devouring, Evolution, Spiritual Communication. Soul Devourer can devour killing energy, sword intent, blood, spiritual power, etc. to repair damaged sword body, evolve itself, and improve its own grade and spiritual intelligence. Evolution can comprehend the host sword realm and gain evolution. Spiritual: this sword is spiritual, it will protect its master spontaneously, and it can transform after evolution. Evaluation: carved with the heavenly heart seal of a world, the Dao rune, it is naturally endowed with the ability to continuously evolve, and has great potential. Although this sword is a spirit sword, it can kill immortals. Looking at Xiaojiu's current information, Su-Mo couldn't help but smile. At this time, Xiaojiu is stronger than before. Stop talking nonsense. I'm waiting for Xiaojiu. What are you waiting for? Waiting to die? Looking at the blood demon ancestor whose heart had been pierced, Su-Mo murmured. The reason why he was willing to listen to all the nonsense from the demon ancestor was just to wait for Xiaojiu to return. You don't have martial ethics. Puff. The demon ancestor was furious, and in a rage he spat out another mouthful of blood. He had been sleeping for 1,000 years, and finally came out, and asked what happened. Can't we talk to the younger generation from the bottom of our hearts? Reminisce about the past? When exactly was it? Your sword is so fast. looking at the heart that had been pierced by the sword. The demon ancestor had mixed feelings in his heart, and he really spoke his heart out. After 1,000 years, the demon ancestor once again felt this intense life and death crisis. At this point, he had completely put away his previous contempt for this young junior. Since you don't know how to appreciate my kindness, don't blame me for being cruel and ruthless, the demon ancestor said coldly. Immediately, blood surged throughout the body, and the pierced heart was repaired as before. Sure enough, even if the heart is pierced, it's not okay? Su-emo was not surprised at all. The defense of the demon ancestor was indeed terrifyingly strong. After all, the skill feature of bloody rebirth is there, so his regeneration ability was expected. However, sword cultivators are the best killers in the world. After preliminary testing, it was found that the demon ancestor had extremely strong means of preserving his life, but in terms of killing power, he was not as good as him. This is not surprising. Although he is only level 98, his ultimate combat power is level 99. It is enough to fight against those who are at a higher level and can fight against those who have reached the state of great perfection of seeing the indestructible gods. The demon ancestor is at level 100, but most of his strength is reflected in his realm and ability to preserve his life. However, realm is not equal to absolute combat power, and his real combat power may only be level 99. Damn it, damn it, damn it! I will kill you first, and then I will slaughter the whole world before I open the heavenly gate! The demon ancestor's eyes were bloodshot, and he was obviously furious. Look at my blood shadow incarnation! The old demon ancestor shouted loudly, and soon his body split into 2, then 4. In a flash, the entire sky was filled with the incarnations of the demon ancestor. There were so many of them that there were actually thousands of them. Facing this move by the heavenly demon ancestor, Su-emo was neither hasty nor slow. There was even a hint of a smile on the corner of his mouth, and the next moment, endless sword intent began to condense behind him. 10,000 swords returned to their origin! Su-emo shouted loudly, and in an instant, tens of millions of sword energies began to appear behind Su-emo. The sky on the left is filled with the myriad incarnations of the heavenly demon ancestor. And in the sky on the right, there is Su-emo's 10,000 sword energies. Brush. In just a moment, both sides moved at the same time. 10,000 sword energies attacked the countless incarnations of the demon ancestor. Bang, bang, bang! In an instant, all the incarnations of the demon ancestor were pierced through by the 10,000 swords returning to the origin one by one, and soon they turned into smoke and dissipated. I was left alone, completely dumbfounded. You are so stupid as to create so many incarnations. Don't you know that Wanjian Geizong is just suitable for group attacks? Su-emo shook his head and sighed. Why? Why do you know that old man's 10,000 swords returned to the origin? And you have even cultivated to the realm of 10,000 swords? The demon ancestor was horrified and no longer as calm as he was at the beginning. His expression became extremely panic-stricken. It is no wonder that he was so shocked. You know, 1,000 years ago, he and the founder of the sword sect were both at the state of great perfection of seeing the indestructible gods, and they were just one step away from shattering the void. He is a giant in the evil way, and the founder of the sword sect is the leader of the righteous way. Before the two broke through the void, they launched an unprecedented final battle. But he didn't expect that the old man had already created a sword technique specifically to restrain him for this battle. As expected, he was seriously injured and fled, and was chopped down by the old man's sword and could not leave the world. He forcibly fell from the state of great perfection of seeing the indestructible gods to the state of great master. In the end, he escaped with the help of the special features of the heavenly demonic law, and was forced to fall into a deep sleep. And after 1,000 years, he secretly seduced many people with bad intentions to establish the heavenly demon sect. Help him to rebuild the heavenly demon Dharma. Only then did he reach the peak again, and achieve the final state of breaking the void. 1,000 years passed, and he finally managed to get that old man to ascend to heaven, but now he has his successor. That old man really has a trick up his sleeve. I hate him. Why hasn't he let me go after all these years? The demon ancestor was hysterical and had fallen into madness. Obviously, the founder of the sword sect left him with a huge psychological trauma. Because you deserve to die, Su Emmo said calmly, thinking of Xiao Lu, and the countless innocent girls and children who were turned into blood by him. The coldness in Su Mo's eyes became more and more severe. Over 1,000 years. Who knows how many people have died tragically at the hands of the demon ancestor, directly or indirectly? Brush. The next moment, he drew his sword again and fought with the demon ancestor. Ding ding ding. Su Emmo and the demon ancestor continued to fight. With Xiao Jiu's blessing, the sword in Su Mo's hand was much sharper than before. He swung out sword after sword with fierce sword intent. The blood light in the hands of the demon ancestor covered his entire body, and he hurriedly resisted. Blood Shadow Incarnation! This time, the demon ancestor learned his lesson and only created 2 clones to fight with Su Emmo. But Su Mo's swordsmanship is so superb. He is not afraid of fighting 2 enemies at once. Brush. Squeak! The soul-devouring sword in Su Mo's hand flexed and stretched like an arm, flying and circling, very agile. From time to time, a majestic sword energy would be slashed out, cutting gullies in the earth. Sword 18! Su Emmo shouted loudly. The sharp sword intent rushed straight into the sky, and a dazzling sword light swept across, directly cutting down the demon ancestor from the air. Boom! The demon ancestor was smashed into the ground like a meteor, and a bottomless hole appeared. The sword energy also cut the nearby ground into a path 100 meters long. The next moment, brush! The whole body of the demon ancestor was ejected like a cannonball and came into the sky again. But what greeted him was the sword energy that Su Emmo had been accumulating for a long time. Sword 21! The crisscrossing golden sword energy continued to be swung out, and 21 swords were cut out in an instant. In an instant, a golden sword net formed in the sky, covering the demon ancestor who had just emerged from the cave. The pupils of the demon ancestor shrank, and the mighty sword force brought by sword 21 locked onto him firmly. This made it impossible for him to use his physical skills to escape. Blood Devil Cross Slash! The old demon roared, and blood shone brightly on his body. Instantly swung out 2 blood-red flying blades. The golden sword net and the red blood blade met in the air. Boom! The powerful shock wave created a huge air wave, and the surface layer of the ground was directly peeled off. 21 sword energies, 2 of which were destroyed by Ming. But the remaining 10 or so sword energies attacked the demon ancestor instantly without losing any momentum. His body was instantly split into several pieces, but it was restored again in just a moment. But his breath became weaker. Ah, how dare you! The demon ancestor roared. The whole body glowed red, and the secret method burst out. In the blink of an eye, he punched Su Emmo again and sent him flying backwards. Smash into the distant hilltop. Boom! Su Mo's body was smashed into the mountain. The demon ancestor pursues the victory. And instantly arrived in the mountains. They fought each other right in the mountains. Bang, bang, bang! The resistance of the rocks in the mountains had no effect on them at all, and bursts of explosions were heard. They fought several times in an instant, and directly broke through the mountain, from one end to the other. Boom! The mountains they pierced. It was as if a magnitude 10 earthquake had occurred. The ground began to shake and rocks began to roll down. The endless mountains shattered directly. As time went on, they fought from the sky to the ground. Fight from underground to the top of the mountain. From time to time, a few mountains were cut apart by a sword. Or it might be smashed to pieces by a punch filled with blood mist. The uninhabited area within a radius of hundreds of miles has already been riddled with holes by them, and the terrain has been rewritten. Finally, they fought and fought until they reached high above the town. At this time, countless streets and towns were filled with complaints, and all the people spontaneously took to the streets. Kneel down. They are experiencing the darkest and most turbulent situation in history. It's just because the old ancestor of the heavenly demon announced soon that he would recruit all the women and children in the world and turn them into a pool of blood for him to make a powerful medicine. This has been approved by the royal family and countless city lords. Obviously, countless ordinary people have been abandoned as pawns. Let us sacrifice our wives and children for him to make the elixir. F***CKU. Why don't you just make yourself? Some people couldn't help cursing, but they started to cry while cursing, covered their faces and squatted in pain, their voices hoarse. I'm useless. I can't do anything. Husband, I'm fine. The woman next to him seemed very cheerful. She squatted down and comforted her husband softly. But in a corner where her husband couldn't see, she gently wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes and hid her reluctance. Mother, I am an unfilial daughter. I have no time to repay you. In the distance, a girl of about 16 or 17 was holding her mother's hand, just like she had done countless times before. But this time, it was held very tightly. She wanted to comfort her mother, and tried hard to smile to prove that she was really fine. But the tears in my eyes couldn't be controlled and fell down in big drops. Her mother had already burst into tears and was unable to utter a word. Dad, what are we doing? What happened to our brothers and sisters? Why don't we go home? Next to them, a delicate little girl of 5 or 6 years old was asking her father curiously, her big watery eyes showing innocence. I have no idea what fate will await me. His father looked at his lovely daughter, opened and closed his mouth, wanting to say something, but couldn't. In the end, he could only pat his daughter's back over and over again, trembling softly. It's okay, it's okay. At this moment, people in the entire city were either crying, numb, or mentally out of control, or laughing towards the sky. All aspects of life are displayed vividly at this moment. When they felt the irresistible force of the might of heaven, they knew what fate would await them. If there really are gods in this world, why don't they come and save us? Someone stood straight in one place, with lifeless eyes and disheveled hair, as if praying for help from God. But no one answered. Who will save me? Who can save me? The warriors on the side watched this scene with numb expressions. I just feel my mind is in turmoil and my thoughts are hard to understand. Some of them practiced martial arts to defend their country, some practiced martial arts to protect their wives, sons and daughters. Some people practiced martial arts for the purpose of being chivalrous and righteous. But when the real disaster came, they found that they had practiced martial arts for most of their lives, but they couldn't save anyone. At this moment, they stood there stiffly, trembling all over. Some of them clenched their fists tightly, and scarlet blood flowed directly down their palms. They hate it. They hate their own powerlessness. A Grand Master can probably be killed by 100 masters of the Baodan realm. But that realm far exceeds that of a Grand Master, that power that is like a god or a devil, and it simply cannot be made up for by numbers. It seems that all they can do is wait for despair. Ha ha ha, we've been practicing martial arts for most of our lives, but what are we practicing for? We can't do anything. Are we really worthy of being called martial artists? Many warriors could not stand the oppressive atmosphere and laughed out loud with crazy expressions. Obviously, because of their powerful strength, they can better understand the horror of the demon ancestor. That was something that was simply beyond human control, and they were on the brink of collapse faster than ordinary people. It's getting dark, is it about to come? And at this moment, as if to give them a more painful blow, the whole sky began to be covered with dark clouds. In just a moment, the originally clear sky was covered by thick dark clouds. In the blink of an eye, it seemed to be night. Along with it came a chilling demonic aura that seemed tangible, and an irresistible and vast divine power. Brush. When everyone is most desperate, a ray of light illuminates the darkness. Suddenly, the whole world became as bright as day. Several arcs of electricity, who knew how many miles long, stretched across the universe, endlessly, covering the entire sky like spider silk. At the same time, another patch of sky was covered by a seemingly endless red mist. Half of the sky was dyed blood red. The red mist and the lightning-like arc occupied half of the sky respectively, competing against each other. Boom! Following the blinding arc of electricity, there was a huge sound that shattered the sky. The noise was so powerful that as soon as it appeared, it shattered all the windows on the street. Many pedestrians who were kneeling on the road were knocked to the ground by the shock. Some warriors at lower levels staggered and almost fell to the ground. When faced with this terrifying might, even the residual power alone would be too much to resist. Is the demon ancestor really that terrifying? Are they really hopeless? Shao Shi. After a while, heavy rain began to fall from the sky. What was strange was that the rain that fell from the sky began to dissipate as soon as it hit people's bodies, and it didn't seem to wet their clothes. Is this sword intent? A Hua Jin warrior muttered to himself, catching the drizzle in his palm. Next, the rain turned into a wisp of sword intent and dissipated in his hand. I saw that the spring rain all over the city was actually transformed by dense sword intent. There is definitely more than one person in the sky. The one with the red cloud all over the sky is the sky demon ancestor. What about the other one? Many warriors suddenly noticed this scene. It was not until this time that they discovered that. It turned out that there was not just one demon ancestor descending from the sky, but two. There, an unimaginable war is breaking out. The electric arcs that stretched across the universe and stretched for miles, where were they? They were clearly sword energies that were so magnificent that they were unimaginable. It was done by another person. But who can be the opponent of the demon ancestor? Could it be Senior Sword Immortal? A powerful man in the late Baoden stage suddenly seemed to have thought of something and spoke in a lost voice. This terrifying sword energy must be from him. If there must be someone who can be the enemy of the demon ancestor, it can only be the Sword Immortal. It turns out that we have never been abandoned. Senior Sword Immortal is helping us to prevent this disaster. It's hateful that as warriors, we can only watch helplessly, and can't do anything. Some people stared blankly at the sky, crying out in grief, feeling great pain in their hearts. When everyone was in despair, it was the Sword Immortal who stood up. But he is still so young, so small. Come on, Senior Sword Immortal! You are the best in the world! That so-called heavenly demon ancestor is a joke! You must King win! A young warrior suddenly used all his strength, his blood boiling, and roared to the sky. It seems that he wants to express all the fighting spirit in his heart. Senior Sword Immortal is fighting and killing alone. I wish I could follow him and go with him. Someone else said loudly, with tears in his eyes, he wished he could follow the Sword Immortal and kill the enemies. Word spread from 1 to 10, from 10 to 100, and the warriors' voices roared like thunder, reaching the sky. All the ordinary people also raised their heads belatedly, staring blankly at the sky. That is, the Sword Immortal. The husband, who had been crying and covering his head, raised his head and hugged his wife tightly. The sobbing girl looked at the sky and forgot to cry. The father was finally able to tell his daughter, "Look, that's the Sword Immortal. He's here to save us." Someone in the crowd muttered, "So, there really are gods in this world. So the god uses a sword. He is so young. He likes to wear white clothes. Maybe we don't have to die." Everyone looked at the sky, gazing at the bloody figure in the sky. At this moment, their hearts were tightly connected. At this moment, people from thousands of households came out of their roofs and looked at the light in the sky. They hugged their families and witnessed the miracle. Zhou Ruoxuan of the Amei sect also looked at the sword energy in the sky that stretched thousands of miles and was incredibly magnificent. Even today, she has successfully ascended to Grand Master. Faced with the tremendous power coming from the battle in the sky, I also felt deeply suffocated and powerless. It's that man. He's here. He's here to save the world. When seeing the horrific battle in the sky, Zhou Ruoxuan's beautiful eyes trembled, and at this moment all the memories that had been hidden were awakened one by one. The figure that once flashed across her life could not be erased now. It is not necessarily a good thing to have met too many amazing people in this life. Because for the rest of your life, no one you meet is as good as him. It's the young master. Ziyun, the former pretty maid, has now become the shopkeeper and opened a simple shop. Many people came to her to propose marriage, but she refused any of them. Because the young master who redeemed him, that little figure who protected her without hesitation when facing the evil, it has already been deeply imprinted in her heart. She found that she could no longer accept other people. At this moment, her young master appeared again, this time even more handsome, saving the world. Xiaolu was almost out of breath, but he was still holding on. It couldn't swallow this anger until it saw its master personally kill the demon. At this moment, seeing Xiao Jiu accompanying his master in battle, he could only lie here, powerless. It gave rise to a deep feeling of unwillingness. Finally, Xiaolu comforted himself by reciting what his master had said before. Well, Xiaolu is not a waste. This is what the master said. After feeling a little better, Xiaolu looked at the battle spreading in the sky and murmured to himself. Master, you must win! Sword Sect Back Mountain. Everyone in the Sword Sect looked at the horrific battle in the sky and gave their most sincere blessings and prayers in their hearts. Elder Su, odd numbers change but even numbers don't. The symbol depends on the quadrant. Don't forget the direction. Elder Su, don't waste your life while your health is low. Stay calm. They recited what Su Mo had taught them. Sword Immortal. Mei Chongqing looked at the distant sky with complicated eyes. They had no way of intervening in the battle. Then he looked at Luo Shi in the distance, whose aura was becoming increasingly stronger. At this time, Luo Shi had already broken through to the level of seeing indestructible gods in a short period of time, and had reached level 94, the middle stage of seeing indestructible gods. But it's not over yet. The aura on his body is still getting stronger and stronger, rising steadily. In this short period of time, Mei Chongqing and the Sword Sect's leader had already witnessed too many miracles. I finally understand what it means to make a breakthrough as easy as eating and drinking water. I am unstoppable. If there is anyone who can help Su Mo, it can only be Luo Shi. Master, wait for me. Luo Shi will come to help you right away. Faster, faster, and we can break the seal. Luo Shi muttered to himself. The battle waves from the broken void spread throughout the world. On this day, darkness fell upon the earth. On this day, a beam of light pierced the darkness. A war that shocked the whole world is spreading between heaven and earth. Su Mo was fighting with the demon ancestor in the air at this time. Although they arrived in the town area, Su Mo deliberately took the battle to high altitude. At this moment, I also felt the surging shouts of the world. At this moment, everyone was calling out his name in unison, and he felt an indescribable shock and emotion in his heart. Ding, you feel a strong force of faith, level +1. And just at this moment, the system prompted that he had been directly promoted to the next level. In an instant, Su Mo's cultivation level broke through, and he directly entered the great perfection from the late stage of seeing the gods. A breakthrough on the battlefield. How? How is this possible? The demon ancestor was shocked. I have never heard of anyone who can reach the state of seeing the indestructible gods and even break through in battle. What kind of genius is this? In an instant, the demon ancestor was filled with murderous intent, fighting with Su Mo again. Just this time, Su Mo, who had been at a disadvantage, can now fight on equal terms with the demon ancestor. The demon ancestor could no longer suppress him. Half a quarter of an hour passed, and in such a short period of time they had already fought for thousands of rounds. But neither side could do anything to the other. The demon ancestor has thick skin and strong ability to protect his life. After Su Mo was uprated, he became a sword cultivator and the best at killing. Now Su Mo's combat power is stronger than that of the demon ancestor. But it just can't be killed. At this point, the battle has reached its final, white-hot stage. Both of them were already severely exhausted. The body of the demon ancestor was covered with many sword wounds. The sword energy was like a maggot attached to the bones, eating away at his flesh and blood. His energy and blood were almost completely depleted and could no longer be repaired. As for Su Mo, his tendons and veins were fractured in many places, his internal organs were dislocated, and his body was badly damaged. At this time, his white robe had already been torn in many places and was no longer spotless as before. At this point in the battle, both of them were no longer at their peak. It seemed that they only had one breath left. "Boy, you are even more terrifying than that old guy back then. Your talent is truly rare. You have cultivated to the level of indestructible gods at such a young age. You can even break through in battle. It is simply unheard of. If I let you grow a few more years, I might not be your opponent at all. But now you are still a little immature. Your tendons and veins are damaged in many places. You have no strength left, but I, the ancestor, can still fight." The demon ancestor smiled complacently, and looked at Su Mo like a lamb to be slaughtered. "Your death has come." "Yeah?" Su Mo raised the corner of his mouth and smiled, which was rare for him. Then he took out a pill and started eating it. "Ding, you have taken the Shenglonghua pill. Your condition will return to its peak within 10 minutes. Hearing the system's prompt, Su Mo grinned. "How dare you compete with a cheater like him in terms of battery life? Don't you know he can take drugs?" In an instant, Su Mo's aura rose steadily, and his aura was like a rainbow, returning to the peak again. Then he didn't say any more nonsense, and swung out with his sword again. Sword 22! A silver sword energy gathered and instantly transformed into a lifelike silver dragon, rushing towards the demon ancestor. "This? How is this possible? How can you recover to your peak so quickly? This?" The demon ancestor was stunned for a moment. The scene before him was beyond his imagination. However, the strong threat of life and death did not allow him to think too much. When he was about to use his secret method to resist, squeak! At some point, a ray of extremely magnificent sword light appeared behind the heavenly demon ancestor. A sword light and a silver dragon slashed at the demon ancestor at the same time. It was actually a pincer attack from both sides. Whose sword energy is this? Damn it! It turned out to be another giant Shenglonghua. How is this possible? The eyes of the demon ancestor shrank drastically, filled with disbelief. A strong sense of life and death crisis came from the body, and he roared in fear. But all resistance is in vain. Boom! In an instant, the whole world was as bright as day. A thick layer of smoke rose from the ground. The old demon was swallowed by the silver dragon. Countless sword intentions burst out from the silver dragon's body, chopping the old demon into several pieces. At the same time, a ray of sword light followed and destroyed the fragments into slag one by one. When the smoke cleared, the figure of the demon ancestor was no longer visible. He seemed to have disappeared between heaven and earth. "Master! The person has not arrived yet, but the voice has arrived first." A call came from far away. It was Xiao Luoshi. The sword light just now was naturally slashed out by her. She had broken through to the indestructible realm without knowing when, and sang all the way to level 96, breaking through the seal that Su Mo had originally set. This hanging. Su Mo was too tired to complain. In just a few hours he had leveled up 7 levels from 89 to 96. Isn't this cultivation just like playing? Thinking back then, it took him 2 full years to level up from level 89 to level 96. And that was because he always had Shijio and Xiaolu helping him level up. And Luoshi. Is this the so-called appearance of a female emperor? "Master, woo, I'm so glad you're okay." Xiao Luoshi didn't care about Su Mo's shock, and turned into a beam of light, and instantly came to Su Mo's side. Regardless of anything, she threw herself into his arms. "Silly girl, your master is the best in the world, what could possibly happen?" Su Mo smiled and touched Xiao Luoshi's head, with a doting look on his face. A mysterious feeling made him feel that he was about to leave this world. Especially when Xiao Luoshi appeared, this premonition became even stronger. Shaking his head, Su Mo stopped thinking about it. Seeing the heavenly demon ancestor completely disappear, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Although he did not hear the system's prompt sound, he still had some doubts. But I think it should be impossible for him to recover from such a strong attack and in the state of the heavenly demon ancestor, right? Master, I will definitely practice diligently in the future, and will never hold you back again. Xiaoluoxi said, crying. Then you just be careful. Su Emo was halfway through his words when he suddenly seemed to have discovered something extremely terrifying. His pupils shrank suddenly and he shouted hurriedly. He quickly picked up Xiaoluoxi, turned around, and protected Xiaoluoxi behind him. Puff! I don't know when a blood-red rain of swords appeared in the sky. At this moment, it fell straight down. Shwa shwa shwa! A bunch of blood swords instantly pierced into Sumo's back. Then it turned into blood rain and disappeared. After a while, Sumo's body was stabbed all over, and bright red blood spurted out, splashing all over Luoxi's face. Master, master! Time seems to stop at this moment. Luoxi opened her beautiful eyes wide, staring blankly at this sudden change. The scene of Su Emo blocking the sword for him just now kept repeating in his mind. At the critical moment of life and death, Su Emo protected her behind him almost instinctively. Ding! The favorability of Luoxi, the person with the status of the Empress, increased by 1. The current favorability is 100. Congratulations to the host for completing the ultimate mission and the strategy was successful. The host will return in 5 minutes, please be prepared. Master. Luoxi stared blankly, her eyes red and tears falling uncontrollably. I clearly agreed not to cry. Why? Silly boy, I'm fine. This injury is nothing to your master. Luoxi, do you still remember the last move of the Holy Spirit sword technique? Su Emo reached out, gently wiped the tears from the corners of Luoxi's eyes, and said softly. Remember. Luoxi nodded. Okay, then we'll use this move to deal with this old guy. Looking at the countless flesh and blood that condensed again and revived the heavenly demon ancestor, Su Emo said. The weakness of the demon ancestor is soul attack. This is the only way to defeat him. The next moment, Su Emo was standing side by side with Luoxi. A tall and slender man, wearing a blood-stained white robe, with a handsome face and a handsome appearance. A woman with a slender and graceful figure, wearing a white robe, with a flawless face and unparalleled elegance. They stood with swords in their hands. Their auras were ethereal and otherworldly, just like the most gorgeous couple of gods. You two bastards! I will perish with you! I will not let you go even if I burn my blood and essence! The demon ancestor has revived once again, roaring hysterically. But in an instant, his expression froze. Because an indescribable huge momentum has gathered in this world. Next, an extremely terrifying and bizarre scene appeared before the eyes of the demon ancestor. I saw an extreme sword intent gathering on the two of them, until it soared into the sky. They were still standing there. But another identical one of them strangely floated out from above their heads. It turned out to be the soul leaving the body. At the moment when the Yuanshin appeared, a sword energy barrier covering an area of 1 kilometer in radius also appeared. Sword Heart Hell. At the moment when the Sword Heart Hell was formed, time and space seemed to be completely imprisoned, and all things in the world could not move. A bird in the sky just happened to break into the Sword Heart Hell, but the next moment, it seemed to have forgotten to flap its wings, and fell straight down to the ground, motionless. The demon ancestor found that his thinking had become unusually slow, and his body was unable to move at this moment. It seems like it's being restrained by something. The only part of his body that could move was his eyes, which were wide open. In his vision, the two primordial spirits, which were countless times larger and seemed to be able to control the heavens and the earth. Like two peerless gods standing between heaven and earth. Su Emo and Luoxi, who were in the state of Yuanshin, looked at each other in the air, then smiled slightly. And everything seemed to be tacitly understood without further explanation. Draw the sword slowly. Destroy the heavens and the earth. Sword 2 and 3. Destroy the heavens and the earth. Sword 2 and 3. Su Emo and Luo Shi's souls drew their swords at the same time. The ultimate sword move of the Holy Spirit sword technique, the soul leaves the body. It forms a sword heart hell that imprisons everything, is immune to all physical attacks, and is a sword that points directly at the soul. Boom! In an instant, 2 sword moves from the soul completely sank into the body of the heavenly demon ancestor. His thoughts, his soul, his cells, everything was destroyed by this sword. With one sword, the arrogant demon ancestor finally disappeared into thin air. Ding, you killed the ultimate boss, the demon ancestor, experience points plus 1 billion, and obtained a gold treasure chest 1. Ding, you've been upgraded. Ding, you have unlocked the ultimate achievement, Savior. Achievement, Savior. Attribute, accumulate a certain amount of merit, and you will be blessed by heaven. Ding, you have 3 minutes left to stay in the reincarnation world. After hearing the system's prompt, the demon ancestor was doomed to die. Wait until the 2 souls return to the body. Su Emo looked at Luo Shi and was about to say something. At this moment, a ray of golden light, penetrating the sky and the earth, descended from the sky and shone on Su Emo. Su Emo was in the guiding beam of light, staring blankly at this scene. Then, looking at Xiao Luoshi standing at a loss, Su Emo had a complicated expression and apologized in his words. Luo Shi. Master. Luo Shi's mouth moved, and he came back to his senses from his shock. Then he seemed to realize something and became surprisingly calm. At this moment, she no longer cried like before, but raised the corners of her delicate mouth and smiled like a beauty that could topple a country. I know, Master, I have always known. In the past few years, Luoshi has always had a vague feeling, as if the Master will leave Luoshi at any time. I always feel that Master doesn't belong to this world. Luoshi stood there quietly, lowered her head, and spoke calmly and slowly. In fact, I know that Master loves someone else. I always felt that Master was so gentle when he called my name. I really like Master calling my name. Later I found out that the Master wasn't calling me at all. I used to like the way Master looked at me, because he would always be distracted. Later I realized that Master wasn't looking at me. The girl that Master likes must be very similar to me, right? When saying these words, little Luoshi looked surprisingly calm. She didn't cry or make a fuss, as if she was talking about something that had nothing to do with her. Obviously, these words had been in her heart for a long time. Luo Shi. Su Emo wanted to say something, but when the words came to his lips, they turned into a helpless bitter smile. Not only are they very similar, they are exactly the same. It turns out that Xiao Luoshi knew everything. She already knew everything. She was more thoughtful than anyone else, but she kept it all deep in her heart, and said nothing. I really like the story of the return of the Condor heroes that my master told me. I always thought I would be Xiao Longnu, but now I know. It turns out that I was Guoxiang from the beginning. I really envied the girl that Master likes, but I'm not her. I can't be her. In Master's opinion, is Luo Shi her shadow? Xiao Luoshi seemed to be talking to herself. When she got to this point, she couldn't help but feel tears welling up in her eyes. She said this bitterly. No. Such a Luo Shi was heartbreaking. Su Emo couldn't help but hugged Luo Shi and held her in his arms. Xiao Luoshi is not someone's shadow. Xiao Luoshi is the Master's good disciple and has always been, Su Emo said softly. Master. Xiao Luoshi choked up while speaking, and she slowly took out her Luoshi sword. Master, please give this sword to that girl, the girl who looks very much like me. I hope this sword can protect her, and Master. Su Emo hesitated for a moment, then took Luo Shi's sword, feeling even more uncomfortable. I always feel that Master will leave me at any time. Until I like Master more and more, this feeling becomes stronger. I don't dare to like Master so much anymore. I don't want Master to leave me. But I can't control it, I really can't control it. How can I control myself from liking Master? Xiao Luoshi couldn't help crying. In the face of separation, she is just a child after all. It was not until now that Su Mo realized that the favorability level had been stuck at 99 points, and that it was Luo Shi who had been desperately suppressing her love for him. She didn't want Su Mo to leave her. As an empress, she could vaguely sense all this. Otherwise, with Luo Shi's personality, his favorability would have exceeded 100 points long ago. But how can you really hide or suppress your love? Until today, it finally broke out completely. But he knew it too late. And once the favorability reaches 100, there is no turning back. Su Mo's body, as if out of control, merged into the light column, and his entire body slowly flew into the air. The guiding beam of light repelled Luo Shi, preventing her from getting close. Even this area has become a no-fly zone, and flying is prohibited. Su Mo knew that he was about to leave here. Luo Shi, I don't have much time left, please listen to me. Su Mo finally held Luo Shi's stunning face in his hands, and his body kept rising. Luo Shi, you are a natural-born empress. You were born to ascend to the highest place. There is no end to spiritual practice. Once you embark on this path, there is no turning back. Today, Master will break through the void and leave. Our separation is only temporary. Master will wait for you in the 9 heavens. Su Mo was already 1 meter off the ground, so he had to bend sideways to talk to Luo Shi more closely. Let's make a pact. You have never been Guixiang. You are Xiaolong Nu to Master, and you always have been. Yang Gui and Xiaolong Nu made a 16-year agreement and finally met at the foot of the Cliff of Broken Hearts. You and I will also meet one day. Su Mo lay sideways, slowly extended a little finger downwards, and said to Luo Shi. Until Su Mo's body inevitably rose higher and farther away, all of Luo Shi's emotions finally burst out at this moment. Master, please don't leave Luo Shi. Please don't leave Luo Shi. Luo Shi cried heartbreakingly, crying louder and louder, holding Su Mo's clothes tightly. But out of control, Su Mo's body flew higher and higher. In the end, Luo Shi only had time to stretch out his little finger and hook it with Su Mo's little finger. 2 little fingers, briefly touching, then separating. Luo Shi knelt on the ground in pain, looking at the rising beam of light. Tears fell in big drops, and he shouted as loudly as he could. Master, don't worry, I will find you. If 1 realm doesn't work, I'll try 2 realms. If 2 realms don't work, I'll try 3 realms. Even if I search all over the heavens and the world's countless planes, I will always find you. Master! You must wait for me. You must wait for me. Luo Shi, today, your master will open the gate of heaven for you. Seeing that there were only 30 seconds left to return, Su Mo murmured. Although Luo Shi's status as an empress should mean that she has no chance of failure, but remembering that the success rate of opening the heavenly gate is less than 10%. He still couldn't help but want to explore the way for Luo Shi, one last time. The next moment. Boom! Su Mo burst out with the aura of the now broken void, pulling out the heavenly gate. Amidst the shining golden light, a huge golden portal was outlined bit by bit. It shines brightly, standing above the sky, and its constantly blooming light seems to be intertwined with law and reason, Tao and entropy. Brush! Su Mo's momentum reached its highest peak ever. The energy of the whole body reached its peak. Su Mo drew his sword. That was a sword different from the 10,000 swords returning to the origin and the Holy Spirit sword technique. But it is the Tianxin sword technique he created himself. Wanjian Guizong is suitable for group attacks, and Xingling's sword is the most versatile and suitable for dealing with various scenarios. But when it comes to the strongest single attack and the most lethal method, it is the Tianxin sword technique created by Su Mo. Brush! Su Mo moved, and a dazzling sword light that spanned the 9 heavens and 10 earths spread throughout the heaven and earth, slashing towards Tianmen with an invincible momentum that swept across the 6 directions and 8 wastelands. 10,000 feet of golden light pierces the sky, an endless sword intent fills the universe. An incredibly huge sword light burst out with endless brilliance, carrying an invincible force, breaking through the surface of the earth. The clouds were split apart layer by layer, and the entire atmosphere was split apart. And the momentum continued unabated, rushing out of the surface of the earth. If you look from the distant outer space at this moment, you can see that the entire planet is parted in the middle. With one sword. A deep crack appeared in the sky, as bottomless as an abyss. Cracks quickly spread out, covering the entire sky like spider silk. Crack! And the portal in the sky was also cut open by this ultimate sword. One sword opens the sky gate. In an instant, a large amount of spiritual energy poured into this world. In the golden light, Suemo took a last deep look at Luoshi, and looked at this world with love. Then his body stepped into the golden light and disappeared completely. Welcome back to the Hall of Reincarnation. In this reincarnation world, you have unlocked the following achievements: Ant Killer, Kindergarten Bully, Famous in the World, #1 in the World, Savior. You have obtained 3 times of reincarnation simulation in the main world, 1 time of simulation in the reincarnation world, and 2 times of favor from the heaven. You have unlocked the first level permission of the Hall of Reincarnation. On this day, the Sword Fairy and his apprentice Luoshi killed the ancestor of the Sky Demon with a single sword, bringing peace to the world. On this day, the Sword Immortal opened the gate of heaven with one sword and flew up to heaven. On this day, the gates of heaven opened, and countless spiritual energies spread out, transforming this world. On this day, Luoshi has grown up. She seemed to have grown up overnight. She slowly stood up and stood between the vast heaven and earth. Suddenly looking back, there is no one in the dimly lit place, and I can no longer find the familiar figure from the past. The master I called in the past, now I can no longer get a response. The tears in the corners of her eyes had dried, but this time no one gently wiped them away for her. There is no tenderness in her stunning face, only an unyielding determination. She would only cry in front of that person. Only in front of that person would she act like a child. She is 18 years old this year, and logically her life has just begun. But even if thousands, tens of thousands, or even endless years had passed, the stars had moved, the sea had turned into mulberry fields, it still couldn't compare to the short 6 years with Suemo. A promise, above the 9 heavens, Luoshi murmured, and the tenderness and sparkling light in her eyes were gone. Her tenderness, her innocentness, her cuteness, only to that person. Instead, there is only a touch of indifference and high spirits of peerless elegance. On this day, Luoshi found Xiaolu. Xiaolu was already barely breathing. In the end, with Luoshi's full efforts, he was saved. I'm afraid even his useless master didn't expect that Xiaolu could be rescued. Its owner left in such a hurry that he once again left it behind. But fortunately it still has a hostess. Xiaolu, I'll go ahead and look for master. It was not until half a year later that Luoshi also broke through the void and disappeared. She was just like Suemo back then, opening the sky gate with one sword. The planet's atmosphere was split in half again, and sword energy spanned 100,000 miles. In the pillar of light that penetrated the sky and the earth, Luoshi stepped into the gate of heaven and flew up. Within a year, 2 people broke through the void and left one after another. They were master and disciple, and the whole world was shocked. However, when people thought that they were the Sword Immortal and his disciples, they understood. These 2 times the gates of heaven opened wide. A large amount of spiritual energy from the upper realm poured into this world. The world is changing once again, entering an unprecedented heyday of martial arts. During this period, secular dynasties replaced each other, and many countries based on military power were established. This period is also known as the Era of Sword Immortals. 100 years have passed. The old people Suemo once knew have grown old. Zhou Ruoxuan was once the eldest sister of the Amei sect and a great beauty. Now she has turned into a skeleton. She finally chose to remain single for life. Ziyun, the former maid, eventually found an honest man to marry. Mei Changqing broke through his own limits again and again, and finally reached the state of seeing the indestructible gods, but was limited by his talent, and could not make any further progress. She practiced Taoism and swordsmanship for a lifetime. Finally, at the end of her life, she drew her sword and slashed out with a brilliant sword. He cut through the heavenly gate, but he himself also disappeared into thin air and died on the road. Xiaolu began to upgrade desperately, trying to catch up with the master and mistress. 100 years have passed, and Xiaoyou's descendants have begun to grow and develop. They perfectly inherited Xiaoyou's genes, and like Xiaolu, their intelligence is no less than that of ordinary humans. Even after adulthood, they can speak human language. With the influx of a large amount of spiritual energy into this world, Xiaoyou's descendants have also become smarter and more powerful. After a century of development, as Xiaoyou's race has been passed down from generation to generation, its appearance has changed and it is called a spiritual beast by the world. 300 years have passed, and Xiaoyou's group of spirit beasts have been hunted down and besieged by humans. Now, Xiaolu has reached the late stage of the invincible god, and he led the spirit beasts to defeat the invading masters and make them flee. Xiaolu did not cause too much trouble to humans, but from then on he used rivers as the boundary between the south and the north, and called himself a demon clan. Xiaolu is the ancestor of a generation of demons. This former pet of a sword immortal finally reached the highest point in the world. Become a demon and become the ancestor. 500 years passed, and Xiaolu broke through the void and left. It wants to fight for its master like Shizhou. It will follow the footsteps of its master and head to the 9 heavens. This reincarnation world ends here. Thank you for reading. There will be Easter eggs for Xiaoluoxi and Xiaolu in the next reincarnation world. The main plot of this book is the constant reincarnation of the protagonist. The relationship between the heroine and the heroines in the heavens will be slowly revealed later, and clues will be revealed bit by bit with the constant reincarnation.